My parents gave my sister their inheritance, but she squandered it on a lazy husband. Now they expect me to take care of them in exchange for a share. Growing up, it was obvious to me that Emily was my parents' favorite child. She was their little princess, whom they adored and regarded as incapable of doing wrong. It was as if their entire world revolved around her, and everything she did was met with admiration and praise. Whether it was a minor accomplishment at school or something as simple as her smiling at them, they were filled with pride and happiness. On the other hand, I was the oldest, and my parents were not like me. If I needed something, it would arrive only after Emily's needs were met. If I had an issue, it was rarely addressed. I often felt like an afterthought to them. Emily and I have never had any bad blood. I really liked her, and despite everything, I never felt resentful towards her. I understand that in situations like ours, siblings frequently develop jealousy or bitterness, but I never considered her an enemy. She was just my little sister. Of course, there were moments when I wished things were different. I wish I wasn't always the one pushed to the sidelines, putting my needs and feelings second. But, at the same time, I knew Emily was not to blame. She didn't choose to be the favorite, and I didn't want to be overlooked. Let me give you some examples of how much my parents preferred Emily over me. Every year for her birthday, we would visit Disneyland. This would be a full day of fun, excitement, and making lasting memories. Emily always looked forward to it, and my parents made it a memorable occasion. Meanwhile, when my birthday came, there were no big trips or extravagant gifts. Instead, we'd go out to dinner at a nearby restaurant. The difference was obvious. Emily's birthday was a big deal, whereas mine felt like a chore. When it came to extracurricular activities, my parents always prioritized Emily first. They only had enough money to cover one child's after-school activities, so they chose ballet over tennis. The frustrating part was that I was actually quite good at tennis. I enjoyed playing and had the potential to go far, but my parents did not consider it important. Instead, they advised me to focus on my studies, rather than what they considered a game. In reality, they just didn't want to invest in me. Emily was never an outstanding student. She never got a higher grade than a B, but it didn't seem to matter. Every report card she brought home, my parents would congratulate her on her efforts, express their pride in her, and sometimes even reward her with gifts or a special treat. For me, the story was entirely different. Even if I had won first place, there was no recognition, excitement, or rewards. My parents always expected me to get high grades. Not because they were concerned about my achievements, but because they wanted me to set a good example for Emily, my younger sister. If I did not meet their high standards, I would be chastised, lectured, or made to feel as if I had failed them. Regardless of how hard I worked, my accomplishments were never recognized in the same way Emily's were. My parents rarely provided financial support after I graduated from high school and attended university. I was expected to take out student loans and figure things out on my own because they assumed I was self-sufficient and responsible enough to handle everything. Meanwhile, when it was Emily's turn to attend college, my parents paid for all of her expenses without hesitation. They reasoned that she was too young to bear the stress of a loan. This felt extremely unfair to me, as if I didn't deserve the same assistance simply because I'd learned to care for myself. It was frustrating, but I had come to accept that this was the way things were in our family. Emily got a brand new car the moment she turned 19. My parents proudly handed her the keys. She didn't have to ask, beg, or prove she needed it. It was simply handed to her, with no questions asked. Meanwhile, when I needed a car for a part-time job in college, I had to ask my mother several times before she agreed to let me borrow her old beat-up vehicle. It wasn't in perfect condition, but I was glad to have anything at all. The problem was that the car was constantly breaking down. Some days, I'd be stuck on the side of the road, desperately trying to get it to restart. When I asked my parents for help with repairs, they declined. My father would tell me that if I wanted to drive, I needed to figure it out on my own. So, whenever my car broke down, I was forced to take the bus to work, no matter how inconvenient it was. Whether it was freezing cold, pouring rain, or oppressively hot, I had to forge my own path. My parents didn't seem to care how difficult things were for me. When my maternal elderly relatives died, my mother inherited everything they had left behind. It was a significant amount, and while I had not expected to receive any of it, I was also unprepared for what came next. Instead of spending the money on something meaningful for the whole family, she chose to go on a special trip just for herself and Emily. I wasn't even informed about it. I didn't realize they were going until I saw Emily's social media updates. She had shared photos of herself and her mother eating fancy dinners and staying in a luxurious resort. I was surprised and asked my sister where it was. She left me at red. Seeing those posts hurt in ways I can't describe. It wasn't only about the trip. It was the realization that they had not even considered inviting me. When I later confronted my mother about it, she made lame excuses. She claimed that she had made last-minute plans with my sister and that neither of them knew whether I would be available to attend. Mom also admitted that she has always felt more connected to Emily than to me because my sister is more like her, and she didn't expect me to mind as much. When I heard this, I burst into tears because hearing such things from my own mother hurts. I realized that no matter how hard I tried to fit in, I would always be on the outside. My parents were overjoyed when Emily graduated from college. They treated it as if she had done something unprecedented in our family. My mother was so proud that she gave Emily half of my grandparents' inheritance, with no conditions attached. She told her she could spend the money on anything she wanted, including travel, a new car, a business idea, or simply enjoying life. It was a huge gift, providing Emily with a secure financial foundation as she entered adulthood. Meanwhile, I got nothing. I did not expect half of the inheritance, but being completely overlooked once more was a slap in the face. I had worked hard, supported myself through college with minimal assistance, and never asked for much. However, my mother believed that I did not deserve any help. When I dared to question why Emily was given so much while I was given so little, my parents dismissed me. They told me that as the oldest, I was expected to be independent, strong, and self-sufficient, rather than relying on handouts. My father tried to make it sound like a compliment, saying that he believed in me and that I didn't need their help because I was capable of succeeding on my own. However, Emily did not appear to share this belief. She was always viewed as the one who required additional assistance, the one who needed to be protected and provided for. It was frustrating and disheartening that, while I was always expected to figure things out on my own, Emily was given everything on a silver platter. Despite everything, I've tried not to harbor resentment toward my parents for how they treated me. I have also tried not to resent Emily. As much as I adore her, I can't ignore the fact that she has never truly stood up for me. She's never admitted how unfair things have been. Never informed our parents that what they were doing was wrong. Part of me wishes she had spoken up and told them I deserved better, but she never did. She always accepted their generosity without question, never considering how I felt when I was left behind. And that has been the most difficult part for me to overcome. Anyway, because my parents had always delegated everything to Emily, conflicts between them began to emerge over time. Despite the money they had given her, Emily chose to return home after college. She explained that she wanted to save more money. However, it appeared that she preferred to rely on our parents rather than be independent. At first, my parents did not appear to mind. They had always coddled her, so having her back home was probably comforting to them. However, the situation gradually became too much for them. Emily wasn't just living with them. She relied completely on them for everything. She would insist that Dad buy expensive groceries, regardless of how much they cost or whether they were within the household budget. She never contributed to any expenses, never offered to help with bills, and always acted as if their money was hers to spend however she wanted. In addition, she expected her mother to continue to care for her as if she were a child. She refused to do her own laundry and instead relied on her mother. She did no housework, never cooked or cleaned, and treated the house as if it were her personal hotel. The same parents who had previously given her everything without hesitation were now feeling the consequences of their own actions and complaining. My parents didn't mind at first, just as they had no problem giving Emily whatever she desired. They had spent years making sure she never had to struggle. So having her live at home rent-free and relying on them for everything felt natural to them. However, as they got older, things started to change. They didn't have as much energy as before. They began to expect Emily to step up, even if it meant taking on minor responsibilities. That's when the fight started between them. Emily would get upset whenever they asked her to help with groceries, pay for something, or even do simple household chores. She thought it was unfair of them to expect anything from her when all she wanted to do was relax at home and play video games. My sister no longer felt compelled to look for work after her mother gave her half of the inheritance, so she spent the day lounging around the house doing nothing. However, this was not the only issue. Emily had also developed the habit of staying out late and returning home at odd hours. My parents would wait up for her, worried, but she didn't care. She was living her life on her own terms, without regard for how it affected others. My parents, who had always made excuses for her, were now dealing with the consequences of their actions. They had spent years giving her everything and shielding her from consequences. And now that they expect her to act like an adult, she simply refuses. Emily's situation deteriorated after she met someone online and fell in love with him. Tom was the epitome of a deadbeat. He had no job, no ambition, and no firm plans for the future. He only seemed to care about persuading Emily to send him money, which she did. It didn't matter if everyone else realized he was taking advantage of her. My parents and I tried several times to warn her that he was only taking advantage of her, but she would not listen. Every time we mentioned it, she became defensive, sometimes furious, and insisted that we didn't understand. She did not consider her actions to be foolish. It was just true love. Emily was always willing to accommodate Tom's requests. She'd send him money for rent, food, and even non-essential purchases like new clothes or video games. It didn't matter that she was still living on my parents' money and had received it as an inheritance. Whatever Tom wanted, she found a way to give it to him. My parents, who had always spoiled their daughter, now had to watch another person take advantage of her. Emily refused to hear anything negative about him, no matter how hard they tried. She believed that helping him demonstrated her loyalty, and she refused to accept the reality of the situation. Emily abruptly decided 3 months ago to flee and marry Tom. It was completely unexpected. There were no indications, prior discussions, or anything to suggest that she had planned such a significant step. She was living at home as usual one day, and then disappeared the next. She didn't even tell our parents until afterward. We only found out when she video called us from her honeymoon. She proudly announced that she and her new husband Tom planned to travel the world and fund their grand adventure. They intended to use my sister's inheritance, or what remained of it. This was the same money that my parents had assumed she would use for something responsible, like a house or a secure future. Instead, she intended to spend it on her absentee husband. As you might expect, my parents were furious. Mom was particularly upset. She thought she knew her daughter better than anyone. For years my parents had favored her, giving her whatever she wanted. And now, in their eyes, she had abandoned everything for a man she hardly knew. Things have not been the same since. My parents, who once went above and beyond for Emily, have now realized the consequences of their actions. They have reduced all communication with her. Now that my sister is no longer their favorite, I've noticed a shift in how my parents treat me. It's as if they've suddenly checked in on me, want to go out to lunch with me, and are attempting to include me in activities they've never been interested in before. My mother, who used to barely acknowledge my presence unless she needed something, now calls just to talk. She has suddenly begun calling me whenever she wishes to go shopping. For years, I'd seen her and Emily go shopping while I was excluded. She now acts as if including me is normal, as if we have always had this type of relationship. My father also calls frequently to check on my work, health, and whether I need anything. Family dinners have also changed. Previously they would make plans without considering my availability. I was just an afterthought, invited if it was convenient, but not a top priority. But now they plan family dinners around my availability. They confirm my attendance, contact me before making plans, and appear to be excited about my presence. It's strange, almost unsettling. Even socially things have changed. They expect me to accompany them to any weddings or family gatherings where they are invited. It will be great to have you there, they say, as if they have always been concerned about my presence. Meanwhile, whenever Emily was present, they never asked if I wanted to leave. It's as if they've decided to make me a replacement for my sister. Part of me wants to embrace this change so that I can finally get the attention and care I wished for as a child, but another part of me is skeptical. Was this simply a matter of convenience, as Emily was no longer available to be their ideal daughter? But, unlike Emily, they expect me to work for them. For example, when my father became ill, my mother was unable to help him much due to a bad back. They suddenly expected me to step in and care for him without asking any questions. When my father was in the hospital, they encouraged me to visit him as frequently as possible, almost as if it was my responsibility to be there every day. They expected me to drop everything and focus on them, something they never asked Emily to do when she was the one they cared about. Then, over Christmas, my parents sat me down for what appeared to be a serious discussion. They informed me that they had decided to give me a portion of the inheritance my mother had received from her elderly relatives but had previously decided not to pass down to me. Keep in mind that my mother had already given half to my sister, so she decided to share some of what was left with me. My mother told me that she and her father thought they should have given me the money right away and hoped that I would use this inheritance to invest wisely or buy myself a new car because, according to them, my 4-year-old car had served its purpose and it was time for an upgrade. I was completely caught off guard. My parents had never been as generous to me before. For years, Emily had received expensive gifts and financial assistance, while I had been told to be self-sufficient and care for myself. I was understandably suspicious. When I looked at them and asked, "Why are you suddenly being so nice to me?" they revealed the truth. My parents sighed and admitted that they had learned their lesson after what had happened to Emily. My father went on to say that they could never trust her again because she had willingly spent all of her money to run off and marry a deadbeat. Instead of giving her more money, which she would undoubtedly waste, they chose to give it to me because they trusted I would use it responsibly. Mom looked at me and told me that in exchange for their generosity, all they wanted was for me to be their temporary favorite child. She said it casually, as if it were a perfectly normal thing to say. According to her, this meant that I should listen to them, be there for them, and look after them now that they were older and had no one else to turn to. Dad chimed in, saying he had always known I was the more responsible one, and he had high hopes for me, that I would not let them down like Emily had. I sat there staring at them, attempting to process what I had just heard. Hearing them say this confirmed what I had suspected. This was not love. This was not appreciation. This felt like they were attempting to bribe me into taking care of them. They'd lost Emily, their golden child. So now they wanted me not only to replace her, but also to cater to their needs. Their motivation for giving me money was not to make amends for how they had treated me previously. It wasn't because they regretted having ignored me all these years. No, they needed something from me right now. They offered me these gifts with strings attached. They expected something in return. My obedience, presence, and care. They didn't appreciate me as a person. It was about creating a safety net for themselves now that Emily was no longer present. At that moment, I realized something painful. My parents never really changed. They did not suddenly wake up and recognize my worth. They simply shifted their preferences because Emily had let them down. And now I was just their backup plan. Now, I could have refused the money. I certainly could have protested. I could have called them out on their hypocrisy, pointed out how they had ignored me for years, and expressed my true feelings, but I didn't because there was no point. It wasn't as if they'd suddenly realize their error and apologize. It was unlikely that they would finally admit how unfair they had been. Instead, I decided to simply accept what they were offering. My parents had never given me financial assistance before. I had always been the independent one, the one who had to struggle and work for everything, whereas Emily received handouts. My sister had been spoiled with expensive gifts, free college tuition, a brand new car at the age of 19, and half of the inheritance from my elderly relatives. So what did she do with it? She took off and spent everything on herself and her husband. Meanwhile, I worked hard for everything I had, with no assistance from my parents. She had received more than enough from my parents over the years. So, if they finally wanted to give me something, who am I to refuse? So I kept my mouth shut and accepted the money. However, since then, my parents' expectations of me have only grown. Every day they appear to feel more entitled to me. My mother always relies on me to drive her around, despite the fact that she is perfectly capable of driving herself. If I refuse, she reminds me that no matter what I've given you, you can't even do this simple thing for me. She acts like the money she gave me was some kind of lifelong contract, binding me to her every whim, and my father is no different. He now expects me to handle everything for him, paying his bills, ordering things online, filling out paperwork, making appointments and fixing things around the house. If he needs something he calls me first, as if I'm his personal assistant, rather than his child. It's frustrating because, while I expected them to occasionally call me for help, I never expected them to put the entire burden entirely on my shoulders. Emily was never asked to be responsible for anything, but with me, it's as if they assume I owe them my time and effort simply because they finally decided to acknowledge me. And I despise it. In addition to managing my own life and work, I now have to constantly think about my parents and their endless demands, which is exhausting, overwhelming, and extremely unfair. I never asked for this money, but now it feels like they only gave it to me so they could use it as leverage. To make matters worse, my mother fell down the stairs yesterday. She had to be taken to the hospital, and the doctors ordered her to be on bed rest for at least 3 weeks. My father then called and asked me to move in with them so I could care for Mom 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was taken aback, and I told him that while I could visit her every evening, I couldn't just drop everything and move in to care for her full time. My parents are upset with me and accuse me of being too self-centered. Dad argued that they had given me money specifically for this purpose, so skipping work wasn't a big deal, but I stood firm, telling him that he couldn't just dictate my life and that I refused to become their full-time caregiver. So, Reddit, am I an a-hole? Update 1. Many people have asked me why I didn't just refuse the money, or why I'm still interacting with my parents after everything they've put me through. The truth is that I don't want to regret not helping them. As much as I resent how they treated me growing up, they are still my parents. A part of me fears that if I completely cut them off, I'll look back and feel guilty for not being there when they needed me. They're getting older, and while I know they're only coming to me now because Emily let them down, I can't help but feel some responsibility. Maybe it's the years of being forced into the mature and responsible role. Maybe it's just my conscience, but I don't want to be the type of person who walks away and later wonders, what if I had done more? That being said, I also don't want to be taken advantage of. Since my parents began treating me as their new favorite, their expectations have been overwhelming, and I'm attempting to strike a balance. I don't want to completely cut them out of my life, but I also don't want to let them guilt-trip me into being at their beck and call. If they truly regret how they treated me in the past, they should show it through their actions, not by suddenly expecting me to step in and replace Emily. I haven't fully decided how to handle everything yet, but in the end, I hired a caretaker for my mother and I'm covering the entire cost. My father isn't happy with this decision. He believes that no outsider can care for Mom in the same way that a family member can, and he thinks I'm selfish. I can't always keep them happy, so this is the best option for everyone. In case you're wondering, my sister is fine. She and her husband are still traveling and enjoying life, and she video calls us every now and then to check in. However, my parents no longer tolerate her. They're still angry about how she betrayed them by fleeing and using the money they gave her to fund her own adventures instead of, I suppose, staying at home and relying on them forever. It's strange to see how quickly their love for her has turned into resentment. Emily could do no wrong in their eyes for years, and now they act like she's the worst person in the world. It's not that she's suddenly turned into a bad person, she's just doing what she's always done, putting herself first. The only difference is that it no longer benefits them. Update 2. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and I finally sat down and had an open conversation with my parents. I told them everything, how I felt growing up with them, how I saw them favor Emily over me over and over, and how it made me feel inadequate, as if I was never enough for them. With Emily out of the picture, it felt like they were just using me as a replacement rather than genuinely caring about me. I also made it clear that just because they had suddenly decided to give me money did not mean I owed them anything. I told them how exhausting it was to be treated like their personal assistant. I was not their servant, and I refused to be guilt-tripped into taking care of them when they had spent years pushing me aside. At first they argued, saying things like, "We didn't think you would mind, and we just thought you were capable enough to handle everything," as if that somehow made up for their behavior. But I stood firm, and in the end, after all, this is the first time I've expressed my feelings to them, and they now realize that if they want me in their lives, they must treat me with the respect I deserve. Update 3. It's been 5 months since my last update, and I followed some of your advice and went to therapy, which has been one of the best things I've ever done for myself. It's helped me process a lot of the emotions I've buried over the years, and I'm gradually learning to set boundaries with my parents without feeling guilty. Surprisingly, my parents have become more understanding in recent months, and they no longer expect me to be at their beck and call. We still spend time together, but it feels normal now, like a genuine parent-child relationship rather than an obligation. It's not perfect, but it's much better than before. Meanwhile, as I expected, Emily has been trying to make her way back. Turns out, all of her money is gone, and her husband continues to refuse work. She recently approached me for help, but I declined because I knew if I gave in once, she'd keep coming back, and I'm not about to start funding her lifestyle. She also went to my parents, hoping they'd take her back, but they stood firm and told her she was on her own this time. Emily and her husband are currently living in his parents' basement, and I hope she will eventually figure things out and learn to care for herself. For 12 years my family ignored me, then Mom demanded I donate both my kidneys to my brother. When I refused, she accused me of trying to kill him. My mother thought I was selfish for not giving Ethan both kidneys. In my living room she cried phony tears and said I killed him for retaining undeserved organs. "You have 2 healthy kidneys, Ethan none. You might save him without harshness now." Daily vodka use for 12 years ruined Ethan's kidneys. Started at 18. Never stopped. His mother purchased his first bottle. "Boys should practice liquor handling," he suggested. Mom thought physicians were exaggerating when they revealed his kidneys were failing at 28. She accused physicians of neglecting him when he required his first dialysis at 33. 2 kidneys died at 35. He required a transplant or died in a year. Unsuitable kidney from mom. Dad had poor ones. I had great ones. I said 1 kidney when she asked. Give him 1. 1 isn't enough, she said. His physique is feeble. He needs both to succeed. Permanent dialysis required. I'm 30. For 45 years machines have kept me alive. You're stronger than Ethan. You're capable. Her parenthood was amazing. His mother raised Ethan as her golden boy. He acquired an automobile at 18. I received nothing. Paid, he quit college. I had student loans. 3 jail releases. I was evicted at 20 for pregnancy. That pregnancy failed. Mom felt my carelessness warranted it. I became a nurse anyhow. Paid for school with 3 jobs. I became independent from a family that disregarded me until needed. Mom never called for 12 years. Neither did Ethan. I learned about family events on Facebook. Not invited to Ethan's wedding, Mom's 55th birthday, or Dad's retirement party. Now they need my organs. I rejoined family. Refusal caused harassment. Mom phoned work about mental collapse. So I informed my landlord I was unstable. I told my partner I would murder my brother. In my shift, she visited my hospital. Everyone, look at the nurse who won't save her brother. She won't split kidneys. Security escorted her out, but she returned the next day. She texted, phoned and visited me for 2 weeks. You murder Ethan. You're selfish. What sister loses brother? Is she unaware Ethan won't die? Not really. He had dialysis 3 times a week. Tolerable. Not nice. That might last decades. I knew from dialysis. For 25 years, 70-year-olds have used machines. Ethan craved peace. Neither did Mom. Restoring her ideal baby without machines was her goal. She bound me to gear. I phoned Ethan immediately. I talked to him 4 years ago. Do you know Mom needs both kidneys? I requested. Yes, he said. Dialysis would last forever. You understand? You're young. Your adaptability would increase. Free of kids. I may, not you. Tried and failed. He said. Said my miscarriage disqualified me for organs. I quit. I informed Ethan's transplant team about Mom's texts requesting both kidneys. Lead surgeon's face darkened. She wants both contributions. Illegal. We'd never agree. Mom told Ethan the team would do it if I consented. Complete falsehood. The surgeon immediately called Mom and Ethan. For Emma to talk, I put the phone on speaker. Mom shouted at Emma for intruding in family business. Emma calmly explained that federal law barred living kidney donors from giving both kidneys since they would need dialysis forever. Mom yelled, thinking Emma lied to shield the hospital from a lawsuit. Mom said Emma was purchased by insurance firms, but Emma seemed professional. Emma relayed the facts carefully, seeming bewildered rather than outraged. Live donors can donate 1 kidney. The law is federal. Transplant doctors denied my double donation request. Mama cried. She cried phony tears for anything. Under the act, I heard terror. A obstinate doctor ruined her plan. Emma gently clarified that Ethan didn't need both kidneys. A healthy living donor kidney suffices. The mom was misled about medical needs. Mom wept more and hung up before Emma finished. Emma apologized across her desk for my mother's behavior. She stated the transplant team wanted to document everything in case my relatives pressured me again. People couldn't discuss contribution with me without the team since they marked my file. Emma filled out forms and took notes as I napped. Mom made me feel awful for 2 weeks for declining. She convinced Ethan I killed him intentionally. I was selfish and unpleasant, she told Dad and half the family. However, a 25-year-old doctor stated Mom's request was unlawful. I wasn't insane. I wasn't rude. Refusing a surgery no U.S. hospital would accept. Driving home with steady hands was the first time in weeks. I felt lighter with expert approval. Out of mind. I had Chinese food on the couch table for Daniel. He stood up when I entered and I informed him about Emma and the call. I started weeping as he gripped me too tightly to breathe. No sobs, just stress relief. Daniel embraced me as I wept into his shoulder and splattered tears on his shirt without saying. After I calmed down, we ate Chinese and he held my hand. My phone exploded at 11 o'clock that night. Mom texts harder after messages. She said I lied and incited physicians to detest her. Poisoned them against Ethan with lies. I was accused of wishing my sibling dead to impress my parents. I threatened disclosure. Sometimes 3 or 4 messages alternated fury and guilt. Ethan sobbed for me, she added. My daughter let Dad down. I regretted this when Ethan died and was responsible. Daniel screenshotted all my phone texts. In my laptop's harassment documentation folder, he put each screenshot's date and time. Shaking hands, I watched him work. Mom's opinions were more accurate after seeing the grid. Daniel highlighted that her actions justified my refusal. A kind mother wouldn't let one child jeopardize her health for another. Loving moms wouldn't say this. After arriving early, Sophie summoned me into her office before my shift. The door closed and she informed me hospital security reported my mother tried to enter the dialysis unit around 9 o'clock yesterday night. Mom requested the security guard teach staff medical ethics and family loyalty. The guard blocked her from entering the lobby because she was familiar. Mom left after 20 minutes of fighting. I felt bad when Sophie gave me her computer security report. Sophie stated the facility values personnel safety. My mother's arrival was detected by security. How was I and did I require schedule changes? I nearly sobbed again when someone was gracious about this disaster. Sophie advised me to ask for help and that the employee support program provided free care. I began my dialysis shift after thanking her. Working with my usual patients seemed like nothing else. While his machine rang, Mr. Klein showed me images of his little granddaughter on his phone. Mother Brennan hosted Thanksgiving despite criticizing her daughter-in-law's cooking. James discussed his fishing vacation next month. Their dialysis lasted 25 to 30 years. They planned, had families, and moaned about life. Ethan wasn't executed as Mom said. Dialysis 3 times a week was excessive. Lunch was interrupted by an unknown caller. Something prompted me. "This me?" asked woman. When I agreed, she introduced herself as Mom's sister Veronica. I hadn't spoken to Veronica since my expulsion 8 years earlier. She asked my advice after Mom told her about kidney condition. She seemed scared, not accusing, prompting a dialogue. I told Veronica everything in my hospital parking lot vehicle. Mom wanted both kidneys 3 weeks ago. Domestic and workplace harassment. The surgeon denied Mom's assertions that transplant workers authorized duplicate contributions. Veronica listened quietly. I heard her breathing long after finishing. Mom lying about physicians' advice wasn't surprising, she claimed. I was shocked when a relative mentioned that. At 18, Veronica's mother encouraged Ethan's drinking. Her mother purchased his first bottle. At family occasions, Mom laughed off Ethan's drinking. No one could tell Mom about Ethan, even though she knew it would end poorly. When Veronica whispered, my chest tightened. My mom made communication tough, so the family rejected me. Mom would get mad if somebody mentioned or invited me, ruining the celebration. People stopped asking since getting along with Mom was simpler than her struggle. Veronica spoke softly, regretting it for peace. Sitting apart, we spoke for over an hour. Veronica remembered Mom controlling guest lists and talks at family occasions I skipped. She added numerous family members were unhappy with Mom's nagging, demanding demands, and conduct but didn't say anything. Mom isolated or hurt opponents until they died. Veronica offered to speak to suspicious relatives. Before we hung up, she stated Mom was wrong and I was right to defend myself. When relatives, not Daniel or co-workers, uttered similar things, I felt something. My first family approval in 12 years. Daniel and I were cooking dinner when the front desk phoned. Our doorman claimed my mother requested lobby access. I became queasy and turned away guests. She was asked to leave. Mom's background voice grew. Regarding maternal rights and seeing her daughter. The competent doorman urged her to go since the house didn't want guests. Mom shouted over the phone. Her scream said the building staff was preventing her from helping me kill Ethan. Daniel snatched the phone from my shaky fingers and recommended we contact the police non-emergency number to document matters. I was scared when Daniel initially called the police on my mother. Dispatcher was informed of the situation, given the address, and ordered to record harassment. Mom was gone when cops arrived an hour later. He took notes in our living room as I explained the pattern, workplace stalking, landlord and boyfriend calls, and tonight's building event. He was tired at 40. Nodding, he wrote everything on this tiny notepad. He said, "This kind of behavior often escalates," and offered a restraining order. He made it look simple and protocol-based. Daniel and I investigated restraining orders on his laptop that night after the police left. After reviewing court documents and guidelines, we listed every 4-week occurrence. Daniel's spreadsheet now includes dates, times, places, Mom's words and actions, hospital events, texts, calls to my job and landlord, and tonight's lobby incident. Seeing violence after abuse helped me comprehend. This wasn't intricate family drama, despite my claims. Consent was often denied and intimidation used. The officer's calmness helped me understand. Not dramatic, he said. He handled it honestly. Civilly liable harassment. I left the parking garage job 4 days later. Mom was behind my vehicle. She looked awful. She had dirty hair, crumpled clothing, and heavy eye bags from days of sleeplessness. I debated turning back and seeking security 20 feet away with my keys. Mom spoke quickly when she saw me. This feverish rant about Ethan being her child and how she couldn't lose him. She stated she understood my past anger, but Ethan shouldn't suffer for family concerns. True tears and a broken voice. I awoke and whispered Ethan wouldn't die. Dialysis 3 times a week may last decades. Patients on my unit did it frequently. Mum screamed I was terrible for comparing her son to others. She yelled that dialysis was horrible and that I was damning Ethan to a terrible life when I could save him with one action. The concrete garage walls imitated her speech. Ethan declined my kidney offer. She requested dialysis for me, not Ethan. Mom nodded agreement. True sister would. Give her everything. Her brother deserved nothing. Ethan was harmed, she alleged. I didn't understand addiction and prioritized my health, therefore his drinking wasn't his fault. Security guard Luke turned. Being focused on us, someone must have reported the yelling. Mom was immediately identified from hospital notice. She was named and instructed to leave the hospital immediately. Luke interrupted Mom's conversation with her daughter. He threatened to call the police if she stayed hospitalized. His voice showed he wasn't haggling and was stern but not harsh. Mom left the garage after staring at me like I betrayed her. Followed me to my car and watched me lock the doors after she left. He inquired whether I was okay and urged me to notify security if I saw her in the hospital again. I sat in my car shaking the steering wheel after thanking him. Mom turned toward the garage exit, shoes clicking on pavement. She backed up 10 feet and turned, furious. She cried, "You'll regret this when Ethan dies, and it's all your fault," echoing through the walls. "When he's gone, you'll have to live with knowing you could have saved him, but chose yourself instead." Luke left. He obstructed her view of me. He remained silent till Mom left. Her car began on the bottom level, fading engine noises as she drove away. Luke walked me to my car and waited. "Try rearranging your schedule," he said. "Come and go at different times, use different entrances, that kind of thing." I thanked him and closed my doors, then realized this was an embarrassing family drama. Security worried about my safety at the hospital. Because security experts felt my mother was a threat, I drove home on autopilot with my hands on the wheel. Daniel was cooking supper when I arrived to my flat and inquired what occurred. I told him about Mom in the parking garage and Luke's schedule adjustment idea. "I found a lawyer," Daniel said, bringing out his phone. "I called Mark Sullivan this afternoon after you texted about your mom returning. I was glad to be no longer alone." Daniel called lawyers and researched as I worked. Seeing Mark's restraining order and family court website, I called right immediately as Daniel made dinner. Mark answered on the third ring with a kind, professional voice, and I explained Mom seeking both kidneys, job harassment, and tonight's parking garage incident. After patiently listening, he invited me to meet tomorrow afternoon and asked me to bring my documents, Mom's texts, hospital incident reports, and the police record from her visit to my building. Bring anything that shows a pattern of behavior. I drove to Mark's downtown office early the next day after work to see his modest but neat waiting area with office furniture and periodicals on the coffee table. After a secretary checked me in, Mark emerged 10 minutes later, shook my hand, and led me back to his office in a suit without a tie, maybe 50. Sitting across from his workstation, I pulled out the folder Daniel and I had made, which contained screenshots of Mom's messages grouped by date, hospital security records from each visit, my apartment building's police report, and the transplant surgeon's statement about the illegal double kidney request. Mark lay everything out on his desk and wrote notes on a yellow legal pad as I described Mom's original demand to last night in the parking garage, asking about witnesses, dates, and Mom's physical violence. After talking, Mark sat back and glanced at his desk documents, saying, "You have an excellent case for a restraining order. The pattern is clear. Numerous witnesses and documented workplace disruption." Mark explained the process. I felt better when a lawyer indicated my case was strong. Legal authorities would take it seriously. 4 weeks after we petitioned, the court scheduled a restraining order hearing. I'd testify and provide proof concerning Mom's activities during the hearing. He'd help me prepare court testimony. Given what you've shown me, I'm confident the judge will grant the order, said. You have hospital security involved, police reports, workplace complaints, and a clear pattern of escalating behavior. Mark's assurance calmed me. I wasn't mean or theatrical, I was protecting myself from a boundary breaker. We scheduled a hearing preparation meeting next week. While making leftovers that night, I answered an unknown phone. Hello? Dad's tired, scratchy voice said. It's me. After Mom booted me out 12 years ago, Dad contacted me to say, Mom told me what transpired in the hospital. I know she's been out of line, but please reconsider. I closed the microwave and placed my hand on the counter for Ethan. Where were you when Mom expelled me at 20, when I miscarried alone, when I worked 3 jobs to graduate nursing school? The connection was quiet, but I could hear Dad breathing and visualize him at my boyhood home. I know I should have spoken up for you back then, said. Why not forget the past when Ethan's life is at stake? Dad, Ethan is safe. He gets dialysis 3 times a week. Many patients at my hospital do it. Dad looked bewildered. Your mother stated the transplant experts advised her both kidneys would offer Ethan the best chance. 1 kidney may not be enough. After the transplant surgeon phoned to say double kidney donation is unlawful and impossible, I told Mom she lied. Despite my efforts, the hospital refused. Dad grew quieter. She said the doctor said that. He hesitated. Mom lied to you, Dad. She showed me paperwork and everything. She misled Ethan. Dad didn't say anything for nearly a minute, but I heard him stirring, maybe rising or pacing. I don't understand all the medical stuff, so I just trusted your mother to handle the technicalities. I knew Mom was manipulating everyone. Ethan thought the transplant team had authorized removing both my kidneys if I consented. Dad felt the doctors advised it for Ethan's best chance. The whole family undoubtedly accepted Mom's version, where I was the greedy villain refusing to rescue my dying brother. Everyone believed her because nobody imagined she'd lie about something so important. Ethan isn't dying, I said. Dialysis is unpleasant but effective. You could live normally on it. Just 1 kidney transplant is needed. Only living donors offer that. Mom lied about requiring both. I explained how the transplant procedure works and how 1 healthy kidney from a living donor is typically better than 2 from a deceased donor because it's fresher. I told him about my patients who'd been on dialysis since the 1990s and had careers, families and full. Dad listened without interrupting, collecting data that contradicted Mom's claims. His voice sounded older than I recalled, worn down by years of letting Mom make all the choices. I need to figure out what's true. Dad listened to the facts and said he needed to think about it, not scolded or embarrassed me. 1 phone conversation didn't erase 12 years of quiet, but maybe Dad was finally seeing through Mom's deception. Or maybe he'd decide it was simpler to believe her story, and I'd never hear from him again. After Catalina suggested family stress therapist Michaela Fields, I took the elevator to the hospital's staff support program on the 3rd floor the next week. Catalina told me Michaela knew tough family circumstances and wouldn't push reconciliation, as I completed out intake papers regarding my family history and present pressures in the quiet waiting area with comfortable seats and serene colors. Michaela, younger than I expected, maybe 40, came out to receive me in ordinary clothes. Her handshake was warm, and she smiled like she was delighted to meet me. Her office had a couch, 2 chairs, windows facing the parking lot, and a psychology and fiction bookshelf. Catalina told me a little about your circumstances, Michaela said, holding a notepad. Why are you here? I got carried away talking. Mom's kidney request, Ethan's entitlement, the 12-year agreement, the harassment campaign, and last week's parking garage situation all unfolded. Michaela said, It sounds like your mother has never seen you as a separate person with your own needs and rights. Rather than fixing or advising me. It felt like you've always existed in her mind as either an extension of her or a resource for your brother. I thought about that sentence all week, working and sleeping. Michaela urged me to recollect other examples of this trend. I saw it wherever I looked. My mom had me take piano lessons for 3 more years even though I hated them at 12. She liked telling people my daughter played. I wanted to attend community college near home, but she pushed me toward expensive universities so she could brag about my acceptance and refused to help pay for my tuition. After I became pregnant at 20, she kicked me out since having a teenage daughter didn't fit her image. Michaela revealed mom's kidney requirement matched. She wanted Ethan well again and wanted to utilize my body without my consent. I didn't realize removing both kidneys would kill me because my needs hadn't registered. Anything else was selfish self-revolution for her convenience. Understanding the pattern didn't ease the suffering, but it made rejection less weird. Mom. I wasn't rude. Michaela inquired about the miscarriage at my second therapy appointment the next week, something I hadn't discussed in years. Daniel knew, but I didn't explain. I got pregnant at 20 while living at home, working part-time at a grocery store, and planning college. Mom was furious, screaming that I was squandering my life, hurting her name, and that everyone would think she raised me poorly. Mom said to pack and go 3 days later. She didn't care where or how I managed. Additional shifts let me pay a friend's basement rent. I cramped at work at 12 weeks. My emergency room doctor told me I needed surgery to miscarry after bleeding heavily. Without someone to call, I did everything alone. I told my mom 4 days later, and she thought it was excellent since I wasn't responsible enough to be a mother. After the defeat, she said my body judged my character for not being ready. I didn't hear from her for 12 years. After informing Michaela, I realized my embarrassment was never mine. I blamed myself for becoming pregnant, worrying out, and miscarrying. I was 20, alone, and scared, abandoned by everyone who should have helped me. My loss and Mom's abuse weren't my fault. They failed me, so I bore their shame for a decade. This was my first night of sleep in weeks following therapy. Daniel immediately saw I was calmer and didn't react to phone alarms. At his home meal, he discussed it. He said he wanted a real future with me. He wanted to offer me to move in before the renal crisis, but he didn't want me to think he was helping. He wanted me to know he didn't fear my family's issues. He witnessed the worst. He picked me despite Mom's nagging and Ethan's animosity. We spent hours discussing our ambitions that night. He desired marriage, kids, and a life without my upbringing's turmoil. I had similar goals but was scared to aspire over 20. Daniel clasped my hand across the table and said I deserved good things and loyal customers. I cried with relief, not anguish, for the first time in months and felt better. The late October restraining order hearing was on a cold Tuesday morning. My hands trembled as I held our binder of paperwork when Mark met me outside the courthouse at 8:30. He told me the court would hear all sides and to stay calm and factual no matter what Mom or her lawyer said. The right courtroom was third floor after security. Mom and her lawyer, an older man in a suit, spoke softly on a hallway bench with his head near to her. She looked compassionate in a nice dress, little makeup, and well-styled hair. Mom's face contorted in misery when she saw me, like I hurt her. I gazed at Mark's serenity. He gripped my shoulder and told me we had facts, but Mom looked so regular and maternal that I worried the court would see her acting instead of the truth. I thought my statistics would reveal a vicious daughter fabricating family strife instead than a harassment victim defending herself. With wooden seats and a judge's platform, the courtroom was smaller than expected. Mom, Mark, and her lawyer sat at different tables. The mid-50s judge with gray hair and a no-nonsense approach quickly reviewed the paperwork and invited me to testify. I stood shakily and vowed to be honest. My testimony was thoughtfully questioned by Mark. Mom hounded me for refusing both kidneys despite medical impossibility. I described Mom appearing to the hospital during my shifts, her lobby drama, security ordering her out twice, and she sitting outside my car in the parking garage refusing to go when asked, with the security man interfering. Mark showed screenshots of text messages, call records showing frequency, hospital security statements proving trespassing, and Mom's apartment building police complaint. A pattern made the judge uneasy. The court stiffened when Mark presented the transplant surgeon's evidence that double kidney donation was illegal and that Mom had lied about the medical team's willingness. My mother's lawyer stepped up to cross-examine me gently. He stated I was exaggerating family turmoil into harassment, that my mother was desperate to save her child, and that I was punishing her for past issues. I'd been estranged from my family for 12 years since my mother kicked me out at 20 and never tried to reconnect. I attended family events without invitation. We mostly clashed about her treatment of me and my brother. Mark stood up for redirect and asked me one simple question while the lawyer tried to make me look like the troubled daughter who created family turmoil. Did I offer my brother one kidney, the legal and medically appropriate option? Mark asked my mother's reaction. I said I needed both kidneys and go on dialysis myself. The judge looked at me like he meant it. Then he asked if she knew it was illegal and would put me on dialysis forever. The judge interrupted Mom's lawyer and repeated the question, her voice sharp. Mom shifted in her seat, her composure cracking. She said the doctors were wrong, that she'd only been exploring all options to save her son, and that any mother would do the same. She never meant to hurt me. She just wanted Ethan to have The judge asked whether Mom knew bugging me at work may cost me my job. Mom said she was just trying to make me realize how serious the matter was. The judge then asked if entering my residence after being told to stay away was acceptable. Mom flushed and cried, but they were panic tears as she realized her manipulation wasn't working on someone with authority. The judge granted a 1-year restraining order barring Mom from contacting me directly or through third parties, visiting my workplace or home, or posting about me on social. She warned of swift arrest and jail time, and Mom's face crumpled and she wept harder, holding her lawyer's arm like she needed physical support. Her lawyer advocated a lighter sentence or fewer restrictions, but the judge was unmoved. She stated the recorded harassment was serious and persistent, that I had a right to feel secure at work and home, and that Mom's actions had violated legal bounds regardless of her reasons. The gavel cracked, and Mom couldn't contact me without criminal repercussions. Mark said it was perfect, and Daniel hugged me outside, telling me I did great, and it was completed. It was important, but holding the restraining order paperwork on the courtroom steps made me feel heavy, sorrowful, and like something permanent had broken. Daniel took me to a fancy downtown restaurant with good wine and low lighting to celebrate, telling me how brave I was and how proud he was of protecting myself. The restraining order confirmed that my mother would never change, apologize, or see me as a person. I was exhausted after the hearing. I picked up my food and drank my wine and tried to feel good about having legal protection, but I couldn't. Daniel noticed and stopped pushing. He reached across the table and held my hand, telling me it was okay to not be okay and that I didn't have to pretend everything was fine just because I won in. He knew that guarding yourself from family feels like loss. We finished dinner silently and walked back to his apartment, where I fell asleep on his couch before 9 without going to bed. 4 days after the judicial hearing, Veronica called as I was getting ready for work. After asking for the medical papers, she told me Dad confronted Mom about the falsehoods with a strained but resolute voice. The transplant team never indicated both kidneys would offer Ethan a greater chance, and the physicians never said one wouldn't be enough. After learning the truth, Dad was furious, and Veronica said they had their biggest fight ever. He packed a suitcase and came to Veronica's house that night to stay in her guest room while he resolved things. Veronica said she'd never seen him so angry or dejected. He was seeing 30 years of marriage clearly for the first time and despised it. She told me other family members had been calling her wondering what happened because Mom's narrative kept changing and nothing made sense. My cousin wanted to know why I was thrown out at 20. I felt strange buttoning my scrubs as Veronica said Mom's long-held story was crumbling and family members were reaching out to uncover the truth. That afternoon between appointments, my cousin Olivia, who had spent summers with me before the family split, sent me a long, awkward Facebook post apologizing for believing Mom's statements about me being unstable and greedy. She apologized for not reaching out sooner and suggested we meet for coffee. No pressure. She understood if I said no. I pondered at the message for a while before responding, "Yes, I'd appreciate that." The next morning, Catalina summoned me into her office before rounds. I worried one of my patients had a problem, but she grinned and said the hospital management wanted to recognize my approach to Mom. Catalina wrote a letter explaining how I'd never let the harassment affect my work and how I'd continued providing excellent care even when Mom was at the hospital causing scenes. The board would put the commendation in my personnel file and give me a small bonus for maintaining patient care standards during a difficult personal time. Anxious, I arrived early for the coffee meeting with Olivia on my day off and watched people pass by the window. Being praised for surviving my mother's pestering felt strange and gratifying. Olivia looked older than the Facebook photos and tired, like life had worn her down. We hugged awkwardly, ordered drinks, and sat across from each other, unsure how to start. Olivia apologized again for the years of exclusion, saying she'd always questioned Mom's version but went along rather than make. Olivia asked about me during family functions I wasn't invited to, but Mom became irate and Dad diverted the subject. She stopped asking because she felt bad about choosing comfort over doing the right thing. We spoke for 2 hours, which was beautiful yet heartbreaking. Olivia left after telling me Ethan was angry about the restraining order and blamed me for tearing the family apart, calling me ugly and harsh. Olivia said Dad was still going to dialysis 3 times a week and ranting about his unjust existence. Dad wrote on Facebook about selfish siblings who abandoned needy family and subtweeted about me, even though he couldn't name me. He was healthy, stable, and not in danger, but he was upset that his little sister wouldn't assist him. Olivia was honest and told me the transplant team was searching the National Donor Registry. Olivia confirmed what I already knew from transplantation, but it made it truer. Ethan would get his kidney, but not from me. Michaela and I explored my complex ideas about protecting myself while watching family relationships break apart that week in therapy. I told her about Dad staying with Veronica, Olivia reaching out, and my strange mix of relief and guilt. Michaela taught me that I wasn't responsible for resolving problems I didn't cause, that Mom's lies and manipulation had been ruining the family before I established boundaries, and that some relationships are too broken to repair. Michaela said it's normal to feel bad about the restraining order, but it doesn't mean I made the wrong choice. It just shows I'm human, and family relationships are hard, especially poisonous ones. Mark phoned 4 weeks after the courthouse hearing to say Dad had contacted out and asked if I'd meet with him alone. No Mom, no Ethan. Mark said I didn't have to agree to anything, but he recommended a public spot and reminded me I could leave if I felt frightened. I told Mark I'd meet Dad in a downtown coffee shop Saturday morning, neutral ground where we had no history. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat at a corner table with a door view. Despite the warm coffee, my stomach and hands were chilly. Dad came on time, looking older than I recalled. His hair was grayer, his face more wrinkled, and his shoulders stooped like he was carrying a weight. He noticed me and sat across from me without hugging or touching me. We gazed at each other for a long time before he started. He apologized for the decade of silence, not reaching out after I got kicked out, not being there when I miscarried, and missing 12 years of my life because it was easier. He said he chose peace over justice and was ashamed of that. He also admitted he believed Mom's kidney lies because he didn't understand medical stuff and trusted her to handle the details. I couldn't tell him everything was okay or that I'd forgiven him, so I watched him look at his coffee cup trying to find answers. The apology hurt more than if it had been phony since it meant he knew what he did and chose it nonetheless for 12 years. I inhaled and told him that words were simple, and he had a decade to reach out before Ethan needed a kidney. He shook but nodded and kept his eyes down. I promised to rebuild something if he wanted change. Not guilty, but devoted to being different, we could meet once a month for coffee and see if trust would return. He looked up, relieved, and accepted immediately. We decided the third Saturday of each month, same coffee shop, same hour, a realistic and safe framework. Daniel and I sat on my couch, his laptop screen lighting up his face as he clicked through vacant room photos. We'd been discussing moving in together for weeks, but tonight it looked real and feasible. He showed me a 2-bedroom with big windows, and I leaned against his shoulder, feeling his solid warmth and thinking about how different this was from my family. With Daniel, I got to choose and build something new instead of fixing something broken. I said, "Yes, let's go look at it this weekend." Daniel saved the listing and kissed my head, giving me hope. I couldn't explain why we needed a house together. At my next therapy session 4 days later, I told Michaela about Dad's apology and our monthly coffee plan. She listened with her usual focus, then noted how much had changed in 2 months since I first called the transplant team. I'd set boundaries with the restraining order, started rebuilding Mom, gotten relationships with Dad and other family members, and now I was planning legal protection. Through. Michaela said I'd gone from terrified and protective to someone who defended herself while being open to healthy relationships. I wasn't conscious of the changes since I was too busy surviving each day, but sitting in her office with the afternoon light shining through the curtains, I realized 2 months earlier, I was terrified and alone. Now Daniel, Mark, Catalina, and even Dad were trying to help me. Not everything was fixed, it probably never would be. But I wasn't drowning anymore. The following week, Veronica invited me to a small family dinner at her house. Dad, my cousin, and a few other relatives wanted to reconnect with. Veronica said Mom and Ethan wouldn't be there and I could leave any time if it felt wrong. I almost said no because family gatherings had been painful for so long, but her voice made me think this could be different. I agreed and she sounded happy, telling me to come Saturday at 6 and bring nothing but myself. On Saturday the home smelled like roasted chicken and garlic and Veronica hugged me like she hadn't seen me in years. Dad was uncomfortable in the living room, and my cousin hugged me. After Veronica served supper and everyone started talking, the 6 of us, relatives I hardly recognized but who remembered me, relaxed. My aunt shared a tale about a Christmas when I was 12 and Mom insisted me sit at the kids' table while Ethan sat with the adults despite being 4 years apart. I heard from people that Mom treated me unfairly. My cousin said she saw Mom give Ethan college money and told me to sort it out myself. She felt bad, but didn't know what to say. Mom often stated that others saw the unfairness and brutality and looked away because it was easier. Each story impacted me hard, proving I wasn't dreaming it or being oversensitive. Though I wanted to be angry at them for their silence, for all the years they could have said something, I felt sad for the young me who struggled to be good enough while everyone watched and said nothing. I thanked them for their honesty, but it was too late. My cousin casually said that Ethan had been matched with a dead donor and was scheduled for transplant surgery in 4 weeks at the end of supper. I felt glad, and something other, since he'd have the kidney he required without risking my health or future. Relief that this would resolve the months-long crisis, but also a hollow sensation that our relationship was destroyed and that even receiving what he wanted wouldn't change how he treated me. I told my cousin I hoped the transplant went well because I didn't want Ethan to die or suffer. Dad clasped my hand under the table, a modest gesture that meant a lot. The next week at work, Catalina called me into her office and told me the hospital was establishing new family harassment regulations for staff. My case exposed gaps in the hospital's protection processes, which they were fixing. The hospital now has clearer rules about family members, faster complaint response systems, and mandatory recording of threatening relatives. I sat there thinking about how mom's misdeeds may assist another nurse from having their mother pursue them at work. Catalina stated my experience would help safeguard other healthcare workers in similar situations. 4 weeks later, Veronica called to say Ethan's transplant went well that morning. I was glad the surgery went well because I didn't want my brother to die. The replacement kidney was filtering his blood nicely, and the doctor expected he'd be off dialysis in a few months. Transplant patients need lifetime anti-rejection medication. After the medical catastrophe, we both realized some relationships were too fractured to heal. Veronica claimed Ethan was already whining about the hospital food and the uncomfortable bed, which sounded like him. Dad called me that evening to say he'd visited Ethan at the hospital, but Mom had been there too, so he'd kept the visit short. Even though Mom kept calling to come home, he said Veronica's house was giving him space to think clearly for the first time in years. Even though it was hard and lonely, he recognized he'd spent too much time managing Mom's emotions and supporting her worst behaviors and couldn't go back. I told him I was proud of him for holding his boundary, and he became silent and said that meant more than I probably knew. We spoke about our days. After years of nothing, Daniel and I leased a 2-bedroom apartment across town, far enough from my old home to seem like an escape. The walls were white, plain, and neutral like every rental apartment I'd seen. I painted the bedroom a soft blue from a dozen color samples the first weekend, and Daniel chose gray for the living room to make it feel bigger. We put furniture to fit our lifestyle, not someone else's. I hung pictures of Daniel and me on the walls. Every decision appeared ours, not inherited or influenced by family or a toxic background. Our vacations and dinners, a record of our life together. No family photographs or photos of people who'd ignored me for years. This place was ours, where nobody could demand things or make me feel bad for defending myself. I woke up 4 months after the restraining order to find I'd slept all night without feeling concerned. Catalina said I'd delivered good patient care despite personal stress. Daniel and I got into comfortable routines, preparing supper most nights and talking about our days without family conflict. After discovering Mom's demands, I started reconnecting with cousins and extended family over coffee or lunch. It was awkward at first, but it got easier as we built new relationships based on honesty rather than Mom's carefully controlled narrative. My cousin invited me to her daughter's birthday party, my first family event in over a decade. Instead of waiting for the next crisis or harassing occurrence, I brought a gift and spent 2 hours with relatives who apologized for believing Mom's lies and rejecting me. Dad and I met for coffee on the first Saturday of every month at the same downtown cafe where we could talk uninterrupted. He always arrived on time, which may seem easy, but it was crucial given his history of prioritizing Mom's comfort above mine. During these coffee encounters, he said he should have protected me when I was younger, stood up to Mom when she booted me out, and reached out during the 12 years of quiet. We would have been better off if Dad had been a better parent from the start, but our connection was becoming genuine and honest instead of the dream relationship I sought as a kid. He cared about my life, remembered facts from earlier talks, and accepted my boundaries when I didn't want to talk about Mom or Ethan. The monthly coffee sessions seemed like beginning again rather than healing something that had always been broken. I sat in the flat. Daniel and I created together, looking at the blue bedroom walls and our life photos and realizing something had changed inside me. I didn't need Mom's approval or Ethan's gratitude or acknowledgement that his expectations were unreasonable to know I'd made the right choice protecting my health and refusing an illegal demand. Daniel, Catalina, Michaela, Mark and family members respected my boundaries and treated me like a person, not a resource. The restraining order protected me, and I carefully documented everything in case Mom tried anything else. I had created a life where my needs and voice were heard. I let some family relationships die because they were toxic and one-sided. Others improved over time based on honesty and mutual respect instead of blame and guilt. Dad was trying to change, so I let him show his dedication. After 30 years of impressing rejection-prone individuals, choosing myself felt wonderful. I found out my sister's fiancé had been cheating for months. I waited until the wedding to expose him. She ran out crying, and I felt no regret. My sister Lily and I were never great friends, but we got along well growing up. She was 4 years older and always had to be first in everything. First to drive, first to graduate, first to obtain a job, typical sibling behavior. I did my own thing, attending community college while working at a veterinary clinic, saving money, and finally earning a degree in accounting. Lily went straight to university on our parents' pay, earning a marketing degree she never utilized. When I started dating Ethan, Lily suddenly became opinionated about everything. He was too short. His position with the fire department was not prominent enough, and his vehicle was too outdated. Meanwhile, she was only dating people for around 3 weeks before they ghosted her. Ethan and I moved in together after 3 years, and Lily arrived unexpectedly to view the apartment. They said the neighborhood was dangerous and the kitchen was out of date. We lived in a pleasant area and had recently rebuilt our kitchen ourselves. When Ethan proposed on our 4th anniversary at the beach where we first met, I phoned Chloe first because I was overjoyed. She congratulated me and then inquired whether I was pregnant. When I responded no, she expressed amazement that Ethan would commit without a cause. I should have known she would attempt something. We scheduled a little engagement dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant. Just family and close friends, perhaps 25 people. Despite the fact that toasts are often reserved for weddings, Lily insisted on offering one. My mother thought it was sweet. Halfway through dinner, Lily stood up with her wine glass and began discussing how marriage is about trust and honesty. Then she dropped it. She said she didn't feel good celebrating after seeing Ethan at a pub last month with a blonde who appeared extremely intimate. The entire table became silent. Ethan's mother dropped her fork. My dad's cheeks turned crimson. Ethan seemed perplexed and stated he hadn't been to a bar in months. Lily doubled down and said she had images. When people demanded to view them, she explained that she removed them to protect me. My cousin Sophia really laughed out and stated that Lily was full of it. Lily began weeping about how she was only looking out for me, and no one believed her. Ethan took out his phone and showed everyone his location history, confirming he had been at work or home every night that month. Lily whispered that she could have gotten the dates incorrect. Everyone was uneasy as the supper came to an end early. In the parking lot, Lily revealed she made it up because she suspected Ethan was concealing something. No evidence, just vibes. My mother demanded that she apologize, but Lily said that I was exaggerating and that she was doing her sisterly duties. I stopped talking to her entirely. 5 months later, Lily quit her mall job because she continued taking longer breaks to flirt with the guy at the phone repair kiosk. She called, sobbing about rent, and said she could stay with us for a few weeks. I said no. She said I was wrecking our relationship for nothing. I hung up. My parents pressed me to forgive her, but I was finished. Then something interesting occurred. Lily began dating a new person, Jason, who remained with her. They got engaged within 9 months. She made a big deal about her ideal relationship and how she met her soulmate. She planned a big wedding that she couldn't afford. When we asked our parents for money, they handed her $12,000. When we asked our grandparents, they contributed an additional $7,000. That wasn't enough for her ideal venue. That's when I became petty. Jason's ex-girlfriend Megan worked at my veterinary practice. We'd never talked about him before, but she said at lunch that Lily was marrying her ex. I inquired as to how it had ended. Megan said Jason had cheated on her with 3 separate women over a 2-year period, and she had receipts, genuine receipts, text messages, images, and even footage from security cameras in his apartment complex. Jason was still conversing with one of them. I didn't do anything with this knowledge immediately, but I did take Megan out for drinks with my cousin Sophia, who had called out Lily at my dinner. Sophia had a loud mouth and enjoyed drama. Within a week, our whole extended family was aware of Jason's past. Nobody spoke to Lily directly, but individuals began refusing the wedding invitation. Her maid of honor unexpectedly had a business travel that weekend. Her college pals recalled previous obligations. Even our grandparents said that they could be traveling. Lily panicked and requested me to be maid of honor when her first option dropped out. I agreed graciously. I spent the next 2 months being the perfect sister. I helped with decorating, went to dress fittings, and organized a fantastic bachelorette celebration. Jason's history was never addressed once. The wedding day arrived. Requested Reds is now available on Spotify. Check the link in the description or comments. I stood at the altar, clutching Lily's bouquet, and watched her and Jason exchange vows in front of everyone. My heart hammered so fiercely that I imagined others might hear it. The officiant went over all of the traditional wedding rituals about love and commitment. When he got to the bit about objections, I stood quite motionless. Some folks in the throng turned to stare at me since they were all aware of the engagement dinner issue. I simply smiled and gazed down at the flowers. This wasn't going to be one of those Hollywood moments where I stood up and caused a scene. What I had planned was so much better than that. The event continued, and I delivered an excellent performance. I handed Lily her bouquet at the appropriate time, fixed her train when she turned around, and smiled for all the shots. Nobody could foresee what was coming. The cocktail hour began, and guests walked to the reception room as the wedding party took photographs. I excused myself and met the wedding organizer behind the bar. She was checking something on her clipboard. I approached with my nicest grin and informed her that Lily had a particular request she had forgotten to share. The organizer seemed perplexed because women seldom forget to discuss items on their wedding day. I stated that Lily wanted a surprise presentation during the reception, something romantic to Jason. She questioned why Lily hadn't told her straight. I said that Lily was concerned that explaining it might cause her to become overly emotional and destroy the surprise. The coordinator still seemed dubious, so I took out the USB disk I had prepared. I told her everything was all set to go, only needed to be added before the first dance. She accepted it and said she'd check with the AV man. I thanked her and hurried away before she could ask any more questions. Next I found the photographer. He was examining photos on his camera at the entryway. I told the same tale regarding Lily's surprise slideshow. He seemed less worried than the coordinator because photographers aren't often involved in receptions, but I wanted to make sure he was aware so he could capture Lily's reaction. I told him Lily would be very touched, and we'd want those images. He nodded and stated that he would place himself at the head table. Perfect. Lily had worked hard for 4 months to decorate the reception hall, and it looked fantastic. Round tables with white tablecloths and gold centerpieces, string lights hanging from the ceiling, and a gigantic cake in the corner that cost more than my monthly rental. Everyone found their seats, and dinner service began. I sat at the head table, between Ethan and one of Chloe's bridesmaids. Ethan gripped my hand under the table and asked if I was all right. I told him that I was okay. He seemed relieved since he probably expected me to be unhappy about having to come here after everything with the engagement dinner, if only he knew. Dinner proceeded pleasantly, with everybody eating and conversing. Then came the toasts. Jason's best man spoke first, telling a funny college anecdote. Then it was my time. I stood up, holding my champagne glass, and glanced at Lily. She smiled at me through tears as if she was overjoyed that I was there to support her. I began about sisterhood and how we had gone through everything together growing up. Said sisters know each other better than anybody else. That we can see each other's genuine selves even when we try to conceal them. Lily nodded and dabbed her eyes with a napkin. I discussed trust and honesty in marriage. How crucial it is to truly understand the person you are marrying. The irony was not lost on me, but no one else saw it. I lifted my glass and everyone cheered. Lily sprang up and hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you," into my ear. I hugged her back and sat down. Ethan leaned over and said, "That was a beautiful speech." He asked if I was all right because I was tight. I told him I was just bored of wedding preparations. He gripped my hand and told me we could leave early if I wanted. I shook my head and told him I wanted to remain for at least the first dance. He grinned as he kissed my cheek. Had no clue what was about to happen. Before the first dance, the DJ informed that there will be a special presentation. The lights faded, and people became silent. My pulse raced, but I kept my face neutral. The screen in the front of the room sprang to life. For a moment, there was only the blue loading screen. Then the first screenshot emerged. Jason exchanged text conversations with someone named Ashley. The communications were sent 3 months ago. Very straightforward and explicit. Ashley asked when he could come over. Jason said he'd come up with a reason to leave work early. More texts about meeting at her residence. Then Ashley emailed him a snapshot of them together. The room became quiet. Someone gave a gasp. Additional screenshots displayed on the screen. Messages were exchanged with one lady after another. 3 separate ladies, all within the last 7 months. Some of the communications were sent only last week. One featured Jason discussing how he had to attend a wedding with his fiancée but would text her later. The timestamps confirmed everything. This was not old history. He was constantly cheating while engaged to Lily. Lily's cry broke through the quiet. She sprang up so quickly that her chair tumbled backward. Jason lunged toward the AV equipment table, but the slideshow kept playing. His parents began shouting at him from the table. Chloe's bridesmaids encircled her, but she dropped into them, crying so hard that her entire body trembled. The visitors sat immobile, looking at the TV, each other, or Jason. Some folks had their phones out, recording. The slideshow eventually finished, but the harm was done. Everyone in the room had seen everything. My father figured it out first. He gripped my arm hard enough to bruise it before dragging me away from the head table and into the corridor outside the reception area. His face was flushed, and he was breathing heavily. Asked what the heck I did. I gently told him that I had just made sure Lily understood who she was marrying. That, unlike her falsehoods about Ethan, this was true. He said I went too far. That this was harsh and wicked in ways that beyond everything Lily did at our engagement dinner. I attempted to explain that Lily was going to marry a cheater and that I was protecting her. He stated I could have informed her privately and provided her the proof prior to the wedding. Instead, I chose to embarrass her in front of everyone she knew on what was meant to be her best day ever. Ethan found us in the hall. He took me outside to the parking lot. His hands were trembling, and his voice was filled with a wrath that I had never heard before. Asked what the heck I was thinking. I discussed Megan and the proof, as well as Jason's history of cheating. I said I was protecting Lily in some manner. Ethan looked at me as if he did not recognize me, said that protecting her would have entailed notifying her quietly, not embarrassing her in front of 100 people, not ruining her wedding day, and not using her misery as retaliation for something she committed months ago. I attempted to protest, but he only shook his head. He said he needed a minute and went away. Everything in the reception hall had fallen apart. Guests were departing in tiny groups, conversing quietly. Some individuals cried. Jason was surrounded by his groomsmen at the bar. I could hear him defending himself, saying the communications were outdated or out of context. Nobody was buying it. Lily had shut herself in the bridal suite and refused to come out. Her bridesmaids took turns banging on the door. The wedding organizer appeared confused, unsure what to do with the remainder of the planned celebration. The cake remained untouched. The DJ had packed his equipment. My mother found me in the parking lot. She stepped up to me and smacked me across the face hard. I had never seen her beat someone in my life. She called me harsh and ruthless and that what I did was terrible. I tried to explain Jason's adultery, but she insisted it didn't matter. Said that even if everything in the slideshow was factual, the way I handled it was incorrect. That I ruined my sister's wedding out of spite. That I was vengeful and cruel. And that she was embarrassed of me. Ethan returned and said we were going. We got into his pickup and drove home in total quiet. He would not look at me. His jaw was tight during the journey. When we arrived home, he headed directly to the guest bedroom. Didn't say goodnight. Did not say anything. Just closed the door. I sat alone in the kitchen with the lights turned off. My phone started vibrating with messages, texts from family members accusing me of being sick and terrible, claiming I wrecked Lily's life out of spite. That what I did was worse than anything Lily ever did to me. That I was cruel and vengeful, and that they wanted nothing to do with me. I flipped my phone face down and could still hear it humming. I expected to feel good about what I accomplished. I expected to feel like I had evened the score. Instead, I felt empty and unstable. Ethan emerged from the guest bedroom at roughly 8 a.m. I had not slept at all. He prepared coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. He said he had been thinking about what I did all night and that it revealed something about my personality that worried him. He wasn't sure he wanted to marry a lady capable of planning such public humiliation. I attempted to persuade that Lily deserved it for what she did at our engagement meal. Ethan remarked that 2 wrongs do not constitute a right. That what Lily did was horrible, but what I did was far worse. She told one fib at a dinner. I ruined her wedding in front of everyone she knew. He stated he needed distance to reflect about our relationship and if he could trust someone capable of such vengeance. 4 days passed with Ethan sleeping in the guest bedroom and me going through the motions at work like a robot. My phone remained face down on my desk because every time it buzzed, I knew it was another family member reminding me how bad I was. Then Sophia phoned during my lunch break, and I almost did not answer. Her voice came out weak and moist from sobbing. She told me Megan was a wreck, and she'd been contacting Sophia every night, saying she felt awful about what happened. Megan assumed I'd use the knowledge to warn Lily quietly, perhaps pulling her aside before the wedding and showing her the facts so she could make her own decision. Instead, I made it into a big spectacle, destroying Lily in front of everyone. Sophia claimed Megan repeatedly stated that she never intended for things to turn out that way, and that all she wanted was for Lily to know the truth about Jason. Sophia then burst into tears and admitted that she too felt horrible. Said she knew she had a loud mouth and liked drama, but she had no idea spreading rumors about Jason would lead to what I did. Family members were now blaming her for everything, claiming she helped me spoil Chloe's wedding. I tried to reassure Sophia that it wasn't her fault, that I made my own decisions, but she just continued weeping and said she had to leave. My mother phoned that evening while I was gazing at leftover Chinese cuisine that I couldn't eat. Her speech sounded frigid and flat, not like her usual kind tone. She informed me that Lily had not left her flat since the wedding day. I just stayed inside with the curtains closed, not taking calls or texts from anyone but my mother. Jason departed the same night, grabbing his belongings while Lily was locked in the bathroom and leaving his key on the counter. They lost all of their honeymoon deposits to Hawaii. They lost the deposit and first month's rent for the new apartment they were meant to move into together. Mom stated that the landlord refused to return any of it, despite what had occurred. Lily was distraught by Jason's adultery, but she was much more devastated by my humiliation of her, and by her own sister doing so in front of everyone she knew. Mom's voice trembled as she said that numerous family members had stopped communicating to her and her father entirely as a result of what I had done. My aunt and uncle were not responding my calls. My grandparents explained they wanted distance since their daughter was nasty enough to ruin her sister's wedding in the worst way. I attempted to explain how Jason was a cheater, but Mom cut me off. They said it didn't matter what Jason did. What I did was worse. Then she hung up. Ethan's mother phoned 3 days later. When I saw her name on my phone, my stomach fell because Ethan's mother was always pleasant to me, friendly, and caring. Her voice was kind as she began speaking, which made matters worse. She stated she understood how I was upset by what Lily did at our engagement dinner, that what Lily said was inappropriate, terrible, and should not have happened. But my reaction was far out of proportion. It was vicious in a manner that terrified her. She said Ethan had been staying with Zachary and calling her every night, discussing whether I was the person he thought I was, whether someone capable of plotting such calculated revenge would be a good long-term partner, and whether he could trust me not to do something like that again if we had a fight or disagreement. Her remarks resonated differently than my mother's smack or my father's quiet. She didn't shout or reprimand me. She was truly concerned that her son might marry someone capable of what I did. When I tried to justify myself, she simply stated she hoped I would reflect on my actions and what they said about my character. Then she stated she loved me but understood why Ethan wanted space. The call ended, and I sat on the kitchen floor for an hour weeping. 3 weeks after the wedding, my father left me a voicemail. I listened to it 3 times, attempting to grasp his flat factual tone. He stated that Lily had such a severe panic attack that her mother had to take her to the emergency room. Her heart was racing. She could not breathe. She believed she was dying. The doctor diagnosed anxiousness and sent her home with medicine. She was now taking anti-anxiety and antidepressant medications and visiting a therapist twice a week. According to Dad, the therapist informed them that the public humiliation sparked something deeper in Chloe, something related to her lifelong desire for outside acceptance and affirmation. The way I revealed her and Jason's connection in front of everyone hurt her in an already wounded place. I did not simply wreck her wedding. I genuinely harmed her mental health in ways that would take months or perhaps years to repair. Dad's voice remained cold and factual throughout the speech. There is no passion or wrath, simply information provided as if it were a weather report. This felt worse than if he had screamed. The voicemail concluded with him stating he had to leave, and the beep rang in my ear. Ethan arrived home on a Tuesday afternoon when I was meant to be at work. I called in sick because I couldn't stop weeping, and my boss advised me to take a few days off. I heard his pickup in the driveway and assumed he was returning, that we'd chat and work things out. Instead, he stepped in with an empty duffel bag and went directly to our bedroom. He began collecting things from his drawers and packed them carefully. Despite my knowledge, I followed him and asked what he was doing. He said that he would be living with Zachary for a time to think things out. He needed to consider whether he could marry someone who did the same thing I did. He continued to fold shirts and roll socks while he chatted. He said he kept thinking about our future children, whether I'd use the same techniques in later disputes, if I'd teach our children that vengeance was okay when someone wounded you, and whether he could trust me not to turn that calculating cruelty on him someday if things between us were bad. I begged him to remain, to sit down and talk things out. I reached for his arm, but he jerked away. He claimed he couldn't look at me right now without being dissatisfied. The word disappointed impacted more than if he had stated he was furious or upset. He shut the suitcase, took his amenities from the bathroom and went out. His vehicle began and moved away, leaving me standing in our bedroom, surrounded by his half-empty drawers. I began phoning family members, attempting to explain my side. I called my aunt, who had always been kind to me growing up. She responded, but her voice was icy. I attempted to tell her about Jason's cheating, about all of Megan's proof, and about Chloe's plans to marry someone who would undoubtedly cheat on her. My aunt interrupted me and remarked that even if everything about Jason was true, there were 100 other ways to deal with it. I could have informed Lily quietly. Could have presented her the proof prior to the wedding. Instead of trashing her in front of everyone, he might have spoken to her as a sister. Then she told me that until I made a genuine apology to Lily, I was no longer welcome at Thanksgiving or Christmas. Not a phony apology, but a sincere one in which I accepted responsibility for what I did. I claimed Lily never sincerely apologized for the engagement meal. She just said something in the parking lot after being pressured by her mother. My aunt's voice became harsher. Lily's actions were described as an example of poor judgment. Perhaps jealousy. Maybe stupidity. Over the course of several months I plotted psychological warfare. They were her exact words. Psychological warfare. Then she hung up. I called my uncle but he didn't answer. I called my cousin and she directed me to voicemail. I called my grandmother and she answered, but said she couldn't talk to me right now because she was too angry. Everyone rejected me until I gave up trying. Megan texted me and asked to meet for coffee. I almost said no since I didn't want anybody else to tell me how bad I was, but I went anyway and met her near the clinic on Saturday morning. She appeared exhausted, as if she hadn't slept properly. She ordered a coffee and sat across from me in the corner booth. She began talking about how she had been thinking a lot about why she told me the information about Jason. She admitted she was still angry about how he treated her, how he cheated and lied and made her feel insane for suspecting him. She wanted him to face the consequences. I wanted someone to hold him accountable for being a serial cheater. But she never expected me to utilize it in the way I did. I never imagined I'd use it as a weapon to destroy Lily at her own wedding. Megan stated that she had been in therapy for a year, dealing with Jason's trust difficulties. Her therapist also helped her recognize something. Using someone else's suffering for retribution does not cure anything. It only causes additional sorrow and transforms you into someone you don't recognize. She stared at me when she stated that last bit. Not nasty or condemning, simply sad. She said she felt guilty for handing me the ammo, despite the fact that she did not pull the trigger. We sat there for a long, without talking, just drinking coffee and watching people pass by outside. When we departed, she hugged me and expressed her hope that I would work things out. I went home and couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. I forced myself to seriously consider what I did, and why. Sat down at the kitchen table with a notebook and wrote everything down. The engagement supper, the humiliation, the outrage I felt when Chloe lied about Ethan. How I wished she had harmed me the way she did. But when I looked at what had transpired, embarrassing Lily did not make me feel any better. It didn't mend the engagement meal or undo what she did. If anything, I felt worse now that Ethan was gone. My whole family despised me, and Lily was on medicine for anxiety and despair. I harmed her more than she did me. The engagement dinner was one night of agony and awkwardness that we eventually recovered from. What I did would haunt Lily for years, maybe forever. Everyone at the wedding will remember her as the bride whose sister revealed her husband as a cheater. During the reception, I took something from her that she would never get back. I sat there writing and weeping, realizing that I had become worse than the person I was angry with. I spent the next several days composing a letter to Lily. I threw away 7 drafts before getting it right. There are no excuses for Jason being a cheater. No bringing up the engagement meal or attempting to excuse my actions. Simply accept full responsibility for my conduct and admit that what I did was harsh and wrong. I shipped it to her apartment and didn't anticipate any answer. 3 months went by. Ethan stayed with Zachary, and we periodically texted about practical matters like bills and mail. My family remained distant. Work became my sole routine. Then Chloe texted me, saying she had received my letter and wanted to meet. We chose a coffee shop midway between our destinations, a neutral location where neither of us had any recollections. I arrived early and watched her walk in. She appeared smaller, exhausted, and strangely more substantial than before. We sat down and were silent for a minute. Then Lily began talking. She said that she was envious of my connection with Ethan. Had been for years. Jealous that I appeared to have my life together while she struggled. The engagement meal was the result of envy combined with a strange protective impulse that even she couldn't understand. She'd spent years feeling like she was competing with me because of her own issues with having to be first, needing to be better, and requiring external affirmation that she was valuable. The therapist assisted her in recognizing this tendency. I told her that I let my rage transform me into someone worse than the person I was angry at. That I really apologized for the public humiliation, the panic episodes, the medicine, and everything that followed. We spoke for 2 hours. Really chatted. It's not just about the surface, it was uncomfortable, and we both sobbed. But it was honest in a manner we'd never experienced with each other. When we departed, we didn't embrace or make arrangements to meet up again. We just admitted that we had both made mistakes in separate ways and would have to live with the consequences. I showed Ethan the letter I'd written to Lily. I sent him a photo of it, along with a long text stating that I'd begun seeing a therapist to find out why I believed retribution was appropriate, and why I allowed anger take precedence over anything else. I asked whether he would be willing to attempt couples counseling. He did not react for 3 days. Then he texted, stating he'd attempt counseling, but making no guarantees. We hired a counselor who specializes in relationship difficulties and began meeting once a week. The sessions were harsh. Ethan forced me to recognize how my behaviors demonstrated a penchant for brutality that clearly worried him. The counselor pressed me on my anger, sense of justice and readiness to punish someone who had wronged me, forcing me to examine patterns in my life in which I had carried grudges or cut people off entirely rather than working through disagreement. Ethan discussed trust and if he could establish a life with someone who would take deliberate retribution on him eventually. I had to sit there and listen, accepting that I had harmed something that might never fully recover. Over the following several months, I attempted to demonstrate by my actions that I could manage disagreement differently, that I could choose to talk things out rather than get even, and that I could be someone worthy of trust again. It was slow and difficult, and some days Ethan looked at me as if he was still unsure whether he wanted to stay. Nonetheless, we continued to attend counseling sessions and attempt. Thanksgiving at my parents' place seemed like going through a minefield where everyone was aware of the dangers yet pretended they did not exist. My aunt, who had uninvited me for Christmas, arrived but sat at the other end of the table without looking at me once during the dinner. My uncle made light chat about the weather and football scores, but he avoided anything that may lead to a serious topic. My mother carefully set the table, ensuring that I sat between Ethan and my father, most likely to avoid awkward seating situations. She asked whether I needed additional filling or another role in the same courteous, detached voice she had used with a stranger. My father tried harder, asking about work and how the apartment was, but even his inquiries seemed prepared, as if he'd researched what safe topics to bring up. Lily wasn't present. Nobody asked any follow-up questions when my mother indicated that she would be spending the holiday with friends. The vacant chair where she typically sat seemed louder than any talk at the table. My cousin, who had helped me spread the Jason rumor, arrived late and departed early, hardly making eye contact. Half of the regular audience was absent, and those who did attend spent the most of the evening looking uncomfortable. Dessert happened quickly, with folks making excuses about early starts or lengthy rides home. Ethan and I went before anyone mentioned watching football or playing cards like we used to. In the car, he asked whether I was okay, and I assured him I was okay, which we both knew was false. The fact was, I expected some people to remain angry, but seeing it happen, having my own family treat me like a polite stranger, brought it home in a way I hadn't anticipated. Christmas was made worse by my mother calling 3 weeks in advance and politely suggesting that Ethan and I come by on Christmas Eve rather than Christmas Day because Lily would be present on the actual holiday. She framed it as if she were giving me an option, but we both understood what she was saying. I informed her that Christmas Eve was okay. After I hung up, Ethan gripped my hand and whispered, "At least we'd have Christmas morning to ourselves." We arrived on Christmas Eve with gifts and handmade cookies that I had stress-baked the night before. My parents' house was adorned the same way it had been every year. Yet something seemed different. My father hugged me at the door and hung on a bit too long, as if he was trying to make up for something. We gathered in the living room, unwrapping presents, and my mother gave me a scarf she had knitted and a gift card to a bookshop I enjoyed. Safe, tasteful presents that did not need much talk. I gave them a framed photo of myself and Ethan from a hiking trip we took in the autumn. And my mother displayed it on a side table rather than on the mantel with the other family photographs. We stayed for precisely 2 hours before making excuses about needing to get home to feed the cat. My mother accompanied us to the door and hugged me. For a brief moment, I thought she was going to say something serious, but she just drew back and urged me to drive safely. On the way home, I sobbed for the first time since the wedding. Not because anyone was unkind, but because my mother's cautious politeness stung more than I expected. Ethan returned after New Year's, but our relationship had changed. He left his belongings half-packed in boxes in the guest room closet, as if he wasn't quite committed to remaining. We went to counseling every week, and he gradually began opening one box at a time. But there were times when I caught him looking at me with a distrustful expression, as if he was waiting to see whether I'd do anything nasty again. We had a dispute in March when I got upset with a coworker for claiming credit for my project presentation. And I complained to Ethan about wanting to send the email chain to our employer to verify it was my work. He became quiet and asked whether I intended to disgrace her publicly or if I could simply talk to her personally. The question hit like a blow because I understood what he was truly asking. I ended up talking to the coworker in private, and we worked things out, and Ethan relaxed a little thereafter. But I knew he was watching, waiting to see who I was when I became enraged. The wedding revealed something about me that terrified him, and now I had to demonstrate, via 1,000 tiny decisions, that I could handle dispute without being harsh. I saw Lily at a family BBQ in June, 9 months after the wedding. My mother had told me she would be there and asked whether I could take it. I said yes. Chloe arrived with a guy I didn't recognize. She was dating someone fresh. He appeared regular, nice, and nothing like Jason. She noticed me across the yard and we both paused for a second. Then she walked over. We remained there awkwardly till she greeted me and asked how I was. I answered I was okay and asked how she was. She stated she was feeling better and that treatment was helping. We spoke for approximately 7 minutes about trivial matters, her new work at a marketing business, and my promotion at the clinic. Nothing profound. Nothing about the wedding, the engagement dinner, or the years of rivalry and cutting insults. Just two former sisters having a talk with someone they hardly know. Her new boyfriend came over and introduced us, and he appeared pleasant, truly kind, which made me hopeful that she had met someone decent. When they departed, she said it was nice to see me, and I responded the same, and we both meant it in the most subtle manner conceivable. Ethan subsequently asked whether I was okay, and I told him the truth. It was strange but manageable. Chloe and I would definitely never be close, but we could be in the same room without everything erupting. He nodded and continued. That was probably the best outcome I could hope for, given everything that happened. I could see he was correct. Some things you shatter are irreversibly damaged. My mother stole my boyfriend and convinced him to marry my sister while I was at MIT, never realizing I'd rise higher than them both. I'm Clara West, 32 years old, and I never imagined my life would turn out this way. As a successful software developer, I always dreamed of finding the perfect love story. Instead, I watched my mother convince my boyfriend to marry my sister in the ultimate betrayal. Years later, when they showed up at my reconciliation party, the looks on their faces when they met my husband were absolutely priceless. Sometimes, life's biggest heartbreaks lead to the greatest blessings. Before I dive into this wild journey, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories about turning family betrayal into triumph. Growing up in suburban Boston, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. Our colonial-style home, with its white picket fence and manicured lawn, hid the dysfunction that brewed within. My mother, Margaret, ruled our household with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. She was the type of woman who smiled sweetly at neighbors, while critiquing everything about them once they left. My father, Richard, was her opposite. Quiet, passive, and perpetually nodding along to keep the peace. Then there was my sister, Vanessa, 3 years older than me. She was everything my mother wanted in a daughter. Blonde, beautiful, and socially gifted, Vanessa could charm anyone within minutes of meeting them. She was a cheerleader, homecoming queen, and the girl every boy wanted to date. I, on the other hand, was the family's black sheep. While Vanessa spent hours perfecting her makeup and social status, I buried myself in books and computer code. My bedroom walls were covered with academic awards rather than boy band posters. By age 14, I taught myself 3 programming languages and built my first rudimentary website. None of this impressed my mother. "Computers are for boys, Clara," she'd say with a dismissive wave. "You'll never find a husband if you keep hiding behind those screens." Every achievement of mine was met with the same response. "That's nice, dear. But did you hear about Vanessa's new modeling opportunity?" My sister's temporary jobs and failed ventures were celebrated, while my consistent academic excellence was treated as an afterthought. My father would occasionally sneak into my room after these exchanges, awkwardly patting my shoulder. "Your mother means well," he'd say. "She just worries about you." But his eyes told a different story. He knew the favoritism was wrong, but lacked the courage to confront it. The summer before my senior year of high school, I won a national coding competition that came with a college scholarship. When I excitedly shared the news at dinner, my mother's response was, "Well, I suppose that's one way to get to college, since you won't be getting any athletic scholarships like Vanessa did." My father stared at his plate, while Vanessa smirked. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would use that scholarship as my ticket out. I applied only to colleges at least 3 states away, and celebrated privately when my acceptance letter from MIT arrived. My mother's only comment was concern about me moving so far from family. College became my salvation. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued my intelligence and passion for technology. I met my best friend Lauren during orientation week, when we both reached for the same computer science textbook in the campus bookstore. "You can have it," she said. "I'll just copy your notes when you inevitably understand everything better than me anyway." Her honesty and humor were refreshing. Through Lauren, I began building the confidence my family had systematically dismantled. She couldn't understand why I dreaded going home during breaks. "Your family sounds like a bad reality TV show," she said, after hearing stories about my mother and Vanessa. "You know that's not normal, right?" I did know, intellectually, but emotionally I still craved their approval. Each break, I returned home hoping things would be different. They never were. If anything, the contrast between my college life and home life made the dysfunction more apparent. By junior year, I'd limited my visits to major holidays. Each time I returned, I felt increasingly alien in my childhood home. My growing independence seemed to irritate my mother, who doubled down on criticism. "MIT is making you cold," she accused, when I declined to play along with one of Vanessa's dramatic stories about a boyfriend who dumped her. "You used to be such a sweet girl." The truth was, I was finding my voice. For the first time, I started pushing back against my mother's comments, politely, but firmly. My father watched these exchanges with a mixture of concern and what I thought might be pride. During winter break of my senior year, when my mother suggested I dress more like Vanessa for a neighborhood party, I calmly replied, "I'm comfortable with how I look, Mom." The shocked expression on her face was worth the silent treatment that followed. Little did I know, this newfound strength would be tested in ways I couldn't imagine when I brought home the first man I truly loved. I met Ethan Carter during a tech conference in my senior year at MIT. He was presenting a startup's new app that helped connect small local businesses with consumers. His presentation was confident, but not arrogant, technical, but accessible. When he fielded questions from the audience, he seemed genuinely interested in feedback, rather than defending his ideas. I was impressed. After the presentation, I worked up the courage to approach him with some suggestions about his user interface. Instead of dismissing me, he pulled out his notebook and asked me to explain further. We ended up talking for over an hour, eventually moving to a nearby coffee shop when conference staff needed to close the room. He had warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a habit of running his hand through his dark hair when he was thinking deeply about something. "Your perspective is exactly what this project needs," he said as we finished our 3rd cup of coffee. "Would you be interested in meeting again to discuss this further?" That meeting turned into weekly coffee dates, which evolved into coding sessions at the campus library, which eventually became actual dates. Ethan was unlike anyone I'd ever met. He was brilliant, but humble. Ambitious, but ethical. He listened when I spoke, and valued my opinions. For the first time, I felt truly seen. Our relationship deepened over the next few months. We'd spend hours talking about everything from algorithmic efficiency to our favorite childhood cartoons. He shared his dreams of building technology that would genuinely improve people's lives, not just make money. I found myself opening up about my family dynamics, something I rarely discussed with anyone besides Lauren. "They sound challenging," he said carefully, After I described a particularly painful Christmas where my mother had compared my academic scholarship to Vanessa's beauty pageant win, declaring only one of those would last beyond youth. Your intelligence and passion are incredible gifts, Clara, Ethan continued. Anyone who can't see that isn't seeing you clearly. By spring break we were serious enough that I invited him to come home with me to meet my family. Part of me wanted to show off this amazing man who valued exactly what my family dismissed about me. Another part hoped that seeing me with someone like Ethan might finally make my mother recognize my worth. The visit started promisingly. My father seemed genuinely interested in Ethan's business, asking thoughtful questions about his startup's growth strategy. My mother was uncharacteristically warm, serving her special Sunday roast, usually reserved for Vanessa's boyfriends. You've done well for yourself, Ethan, my mother said, refilling his wine glass for the third time. Stanford, Google, and now your own company at such a young age. Very impressive. I should have recognized the gleam in her eye. It wasn't approval of my choice. It was assessment of an asset. Vanessa arrived halfway through dinner, making what I now realized was a calculated late entrance. She'd been in the area and decided to drop by, though she lived 40 minutes away. She was between boyfriends at the time and had recently been laid off from her receptionist job at a local real estate office. My sister swept into the dining room in a form-fitting dress, hair and makeup perfect despite her claims of just being in the neighborhood. She kissed everyone hello, lingering slightly when she reached Ethan. I noticed her hand resting on his shoulder as she leaned in. So, you're the genius programmer Clara's been hiding from us, she said with a laugh that somehow made it sound like I'd been keeping secrets, rather than simply living my life 3 states away. Throughout the remainder of dinner, Vanessa inserted herself into every conversation, strategically highlighting connections between herself and Ethan. They discovered they both enjoyed hiking, though Vanessa had gone exactly once for a photo shoot. They both loved sushi, though Vanessa typically complained about raw fish. They both enjoyed indie films, though Vanessa usually fell asleep during anything without explosions or romance. I watched Ethan carefully during these exchanges, relieved to see him responding politely but returning his attention to me or my father after each of Vanessa's interruptions. When she asked about his business model, claiming a secret interest in tech entrepreneurship that was news to everyone at the table, he gave brief answers before turning to me. Clara's actually been helping me refine the algorithm, he said, squeezing my hand under the table. She spotted inefficiencies I'd missed entirely. My mother cleared her throat. Well, isn't that nice? Vanessa has quite a head for business too. You know, she nearly majored in marketing before deciding on communications. I changed because marketing seemed too limiting, Vanessa added quickly. I wanted something broader. What she didn't mention was that she'd failed the introductory marketing course twice before switching majors. Despite these undercurrents, the weekend visit ended on a positive note. Ethan and I drove back to Cambridge, and he seemed genuinely impressed with my family. Your mother really went all out with that dinner, he said. And your sister is certainly energetic. I laughed nervously. That's one way to put it. Your dad seems great too, though quieter than I expected based on your stories. He's different when my mother's around, I explained, more subdued. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, but didn't comment further. Over the next few weeks, our relationship deepened further. Late one night, as we lay looking at the stars from the roof of his apartment building, Ethan broached our future for the first time. Have you thought about what happens after graduation? He asked, his fingers intertwined with mine. Job hunting, I guess, I replied. I've had a few interviews lined up. What if? He hesitated. What if you came to work with me instead? We could expand the business together. Your skills complement mine perfectly. My heart raced. Are you serious? Completely, and maybe... He squeezed my hand. Maybe we could look for an apartment together too. If you wanted. For the first time I allowed myself to envision a future where I was truly happy, a life built with someone who valued me for exactly who I was. I turned to kiss him, overwhelmed with emotion. I'll take that as a yes, he whispered against my lips. Little did I know that while I was dreaming of our future together, forces were already in motion to ensure it would never happen. My final semester at MIT should have been exciting. I had excellent job prospects, a capstone project that was garnering attention from industry professionals, and a relationship that gave me the emotional support I'd always craved. Instead, it became the period when everything fell apart. The changes were subtle at first. Ethan began taking longer to respond to texts. Our daily phone calls became every other day, then twice a week. He canceled our standing Friday night date 3 weeks in a row, citing meetings with potential investors that mysteriously always seemed to run late. "I'm sorry, babe," he'd say, sounding genuinely regretful. "This round of funding is crucial. Once it's secured, things will calm down." I believed him because I had no reason not to. His startup was at a critical growth stage, and I understood the demands of the tech world. I was busy too, spending long hours in the lab perfecting my capstone project. Still, something felt off. One evening, while scrolling through Instagram, I noticed a post from a restaurant in my hometown. The image showed their famous chocolate lava cake, and the caption mentioned a special visitor from the tech world. In the background of the photo, blurred but recognizable, was Ethan's profile. My stomach dropped. He told me he was in New York that weekend, meeting investors. What was he doing in my hometown, 3 hours in the opposite direction? When I confronted him during our next call, his explanation came too quickly. "It was a last-minute change of plans. A potential investor lives near your parents and suggested meeting there. I was going to tell you, but I knew you were stressed about your project deadline." "Did you see my family while you were there?" I asked. A pause. "Too long. I ran into your mom at the grocery store. Pure coincidence. She insisted I come over for coffee since I was in town." Something in his voice sounded off, but I couldn't identify what. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the distance and stress were making me insecure. I threw myself deeper into my project, ignoring the growing unease. 3 weeks later, during spring break, I decided to surprise Ethan by driving to his apartment instead of going home. I hadn't told my family I was coming either. The thought of another tense dinner with Vanessa's increasingly obvious flirtation toward Ethan was more than I could handle that week. When I arrived at Ethan's building, his car wasn't in its usual spot. On a hunch, I drove to his office. His car wasn't there either, but his business partner Ryan was just leaving. "Ethan?" Ryan looked confused when I asked. "He took a few days off, said he was visiting family." Ethan's family lived in California. Mine lived in Massachusetts. We were in Cambridge. I drove home in a daze, not entirely sure what I was thinking or planning. 6 hours later, I pulled into my parents' driveway at 11 p.m. My father's car was there. So was my mother's. And parked behind them was Ethan's distinctive blue Subaru, with a small dent in the passenger door from when we'd gone hiking and a rock had hit it during a minor landslide. The house was dark, except for the living room. I used my key to enter quietly, hearing low voices from that direction. I moved toward the sound, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. I stopped at the living room entrance, partially hidden by the hallway wall. Ethan sat on our couch, my sister beside him, closer than friends would sit. My mother was in her favorite armchair across from them, leaning forward animatedly as she spoke. "You two make so much sense together," she was saying. "Clara is so absorbed in her computer world. She'll never fully appreciate what you're building, Ethan. You need someone who understands the social aspects of business, the connections, the networking. Vanessa has those skills in abundance." "Clara has been really distant lately," Ethan replied, though he shifted uncomfortably. "Always working on her project." "That's how she is," Vanessa chimed in, placing her hand on his knee. "Always choosing computers over people. Remember when she skipped my college graduation to attend that tech conference?" I hadn't. I'd skipped it because Vanessa specifically told me not to come after I'd refused to write her final term paper for her. "I just don't know anymore," Ethan continued. "Things were so clear a few months ago." "But now you need to think about your future," my mother pressed. "Vanessa can be the perfect partner for a man with your ambitions. The supportive wife who makes the right connections, hosts the right dinner parties. Can you honestly see Clara doing that? She'd probably wear jeans to a business function and talk about coding all night." I must have made a sound, because suddenly all three heads turned in my direction. The look on Ethan's face, shock mingled with guilt, told me everything I needed to know. "Clara." My mother recovered first. "What a surprise. We thought you were staying at school this week." I ignored her, focusing on Ethan. "How long has this been going on?" He stood up, moving away from Vanessa. "It's not what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you've been coming to my family home behind my back. It looks like you're sitting here with my mother and sister, discussing our relationship and your doubts about me. What part am I misinterpreting?" "Sweetheart," my mother interjected, "we're just having a conversation. Ethan has been kind enough to visit your father and me occasionally. Is that so wrong? And me ending up here during those visits is pure coincidence," Vanessa added with a smirk, one that disappeared when my mother shot her a warning look. When did these visits start? I asked Ethan directly. He couldn't meet my eyes. A couple months ago, your mom called me. Said your dad was having health issues and wanted some company while your mom ran errands. It seemed harmless. My father had no health issues, and he was currently upstairs, oblivious, or deliberately absent from the scene. And then, Ethan ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture now painful to watch. Then it became regular. Your mom would call, say they missed having young people around. I'd stop by when I was in the area. When you told me you were somewhere else. He didn't deny it. Clara, my mother stood, approaching me like I was a wounded animal that might lash out. You're overreacting. Ethan has been confused about your relationship. That's natural when young people are planning their futures. I simply pointed out that perhaps you two want different things, and suggested my sister as a convenient replacement. I finished for her. Don't be crude, my mother snapped, her gentle facade cracking. I merely observed that Vanessa might be more aligned with the type of life Ethan is building. You've made it abundantly clear that your computers come first. What successful man wants to be second place in his wife's life? The word wife hung in the air. Ethan and I had discussed moving in together, but marriage had been only an implied someday. I turned to Ethan. Do you agree with her assessment, that I'm too focused on my career to be a good partner to you? He hesitated. And in that hesitation, I had my answer. Clara, he finally said, you have to admit, things have changed. You're always working on your project for graduation. I interrupted. It's temporary, and you've been equally busy with your startup. I never once doubted your commitment because of it. It's not just that, he continued weakly. Your family has helped me see that maybe we want different futures. My family, I repeated flatly. You mean my mother, and the sister who's apparently been pursuing you behind my back. No one's been pursuing anyone, Vanessa protested, though her hand still rested possessively on the couch where Ethan had been sitting. I laughed, a hollow sound that startled even me. Mom, why? Why would you do this? For a moment, my mother's mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating woman beneath. Let's be practical, Clara. Vanessa needs a successful husband more than you do. You'll always be able to support yourself with your computer job. Vanessa needs security, social standing. The brutal honesty stunned me into silence. Besides, she continued, apparently believing this logic would convince me. You were never going to be the right wife for someone like Ethan. He needs someone who understands the social requirements of being married to a successful man, someone who can entertain, who knows the right people, someone who puts family first. I think what your mother means, Ethan interjected, apparently finding his voice, is that we might want different things in life. No, I think my mother was perfectly clear, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. She decided my sister deserves you more than I do. So she orchestrated this whole scenario, and you went along with it. I turned to leave, then paused. Where's Dad in all this? My mother's expression tightened. Your father doesn't involve himself in these matters, which meant he knew and did nothing. Again. I looked at Ethan one last time. We're done. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't try to explain. Whatever we had is over. As I walked out, I heard my mother saying, she'll calm down eventually. Clara has always been dramatic about these things. I got in my car and drove until I couldn't see through my tears anymore. Pulling over at a highway rest stop, I called the only person I could trust. Lauren, I need help. Everything's falling apart. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and definitely couldn't focus on completing my final semester. After spending 4 years working toward my degree, I made the painful decision to withdraw with just 2 months remaining. My academic advisor was shocked. This isn't like you, Clara, she said during our meeting. Whatever is happening, we can work around it. Extensions, incomplete grades that you can finish during the summer. But the thought of remaining in Cambridge, where every coffee shop and library corner held memories of Ethan, was unbearable. More importantly, I couldn't bear the thought of graduation with no one in the audience truly cheering for me. The facade had been completely shattered. Lauren offered me her couch until I figured out my next steps. Her tiny apartment became my refuge as I cycled through grief, rage, and paralyzing self-doubt. Some days, I couldn't get out of bed, replaying my mother's words in my head. Vanessa needs a successful husband more than you do. Had my entire family relationship been a competition I wasn't even aware I was participating in? Your mother is genuinely the most toxic person I've ever heard of, Lauren declared one evening as we split a pint of ice cream. And I once had a roommate who stole my identity and opened 3 credit cards. Despite her attempts at humor, I could see Lauren's growing concern. After I spent a week barely leaving the couch, she gently suggested therapy. Just a few sessions, she urged. My cousin went after her divorce and said it changed her life. Mostly to appease her, I agreed. The therapist, Dr. Linden, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that cut through my foggy mental state. What your family did was a profound betrayal, she told me in our first session. Your feelings are completely valid, but you have choices now about what role they play in your future. Over the next few months, those weekly sessions became anchors. Dr. Linden helped me see patterns in my family dynamics that went far beyond this final betrayal. More importantly, she helped me understand that I didn't have to continue participating in them. Your mother's behavior suggests deeply rooted insecurities that she's projecting onto both you and your sister, Dr. Linden explained. But her issues don't have to become your issues. By August, I had made a decision. I applied to complete my degree at the University of Washington in Seattle, as far from both Boston and California as I could reasonably get. With my MIT transcript and glowing recommendations from professors, I was accepted with a scholarship that would cover my final semester. Saying goodbye to Lauren was difficult. She had been my rock during the darkest period of my life. You better video call me every week, she said fiercely as we hugged at the airport. And I'm coming to your graduation with an embarrassingly large sign and air horns. Seattle felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater. The city's blend of technology and natural beauty suited me perfectly. I found a tiny studio apartment near campus and decorated it with absolutely nothing that reminded me of my past life. No family photos, no mementos from MIT, no traces of Ethan. My phone remained largely silent. Ethan had tried calling and texting for the first few weeks after our confrontation, his messages evolving from defensive, "You didn't give me a chance to explain," to apologetic, "I made a terrible mistake," to pathetically nostalgic, "Remember when we watched the meteor shower on my roof?" I never responded, eventually blocking his number. My parents' communications followed a predictable pattern. My mother acted as if nothing had happened, sending chatty texts about neighborhood gossip and Vanessa's latest adventures. My father sent occasional brief messages, usually devoid of any real content. "Hope you're doing well." Neither acknowledged the betrayal directly. I responded minimally to my father and not at all to my mother. Through social media, which I rarely checked anymore, I learned that Ethan and Vanessa were officially dating. 2 months later, they were engaged. The announcement featured a photo of them with my beaming mother between them. My father stood slightly apart, his smile not reaching his eyes. I deactivated all my accounts that day. With my social media gone and my old connections fading, I poured everything into rebuilding my life. I completed my degree with honors, attended by Lauren and her family, but no one from my own. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level position at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Seattle. The salary was modest, but the role offered valuable experience and, most importantly, a foot in the door of the Seattle tech scene. Slowly, I built a new friend circle. There was Kim from the rock climbing gym, who dragged me out for weekend hikes, insisting physical activity was essential for mental health. Aaron and David, a couple from my apartment building, adopted me into their friend group after discovering my pitiful, empty refrigerator when they brought over misdelivered mail. And there was Lena from work, whose quiet competence and dry humor made our long coding sessions enjoyable, rather than merely tolerable. These new friends knew nothing of my family drama. To them, I was simply Clara from the East Coast, who didn't talk much about home. They accepted this without question, filling our time together with present joys rather than past sorrows. 1 year after moving to Seattle, I received a text from my father that finally acknowledged reality. "Vanessa and Ethan's wedding this weekend. Your mother asks if you've changed your mind about attending." I hadn't been invited. I hadn't expected to be. I responded simply, "No." My father's reply came hours later. "I understand. I'm sorry, Clara." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd received from any of them. And while insufficient, it opened a thin channel of communication between us. We began exchanging occasional texts, nothing deep, usually just brief life updates. He never mentioned my mother or Vanessa, and I never asked. Through this minimal connection, I learned that Ethan's startup had failed 6 months after their wedding. He was now working for a competitor of the company he'd founded, a significant step down from CEO. Vanessa was between jobs again. They had moved into my parents' guest house temporarily while Ethan regrouped. This information should have brought satisfaction, perhaps even joy. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness. Their struggles didn't undo my pain or restore what I'd lost. Success, I realized, would be the best revenge, not because it would hurt them, but because it would fulfill me. Around this time, I was assigned to a new project at work, developing software for healthcare systems. The project lead was Omar Khan, a brilliant developer with 15 years of experience who had recently transferred from our San Francisco office. Under his mentorship, my skills expanded exponentially. "You have remarkable talent," he told me during a code review, "but you're playing it safe. Don't be afraid to propose solutions that break conventional approaches." His encouragement pushed me to develop innovative algorithms that significantly improved our system's efficiency. When the project was completed ahead of schedule and under budget, Omar made sure the entire department knew my contributions had been key to its success. That project led to my first promotion, then to larger responsibilities and leadership roles. By my third year in Seattle, I had established a reputation as someone who solved problems others couldn't. My career was flourishing in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark days on Lauren's couch. Yet despite professional success and a supportive friend circle, I kept potential romantic partners at arm's length. The betrayal had left scars that made trusting difficult. Several promising relationships ended when I couldn't bring myself to be fully vulnerable. The wall I'd built for protection had become a prison of sorts. Dr. Linden, with whom I still had occasional video sessions, gently pointed this out. "Walls keep out pain," she said, "but they also keep out joy. At some point, you'll need to decide if the protection is worth the isolation." I wasn't sure it wasn't, but life has a way of making decisions for us when we hesitate too long to make them ourselves. The Nexus project was my company's most ambitious undertaking to date, a comprehensive system designed to integrate patient data across healthcare providers while maintaining strict privacy protocols. The complexity required assembling an elite team drawn from multiple departments. As one of the lead developers, I attended the kickoff meeting with both excitement and trepidation. Our department head opened the session. "Before we begin, I'd like to introduce Daniel Zhang, who's joining us from our Toronto office. Daniel will be the technical architect for Nexus, bringing his expertise in secure systems design and implementation." Daniel entered the conference room, and my first impression was of quiet competence. Around my age, maybe a year or two older, with thoughtful eyes behind simple glasses, and a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. When he spoke, explaining his vision for the project architecture, his passion for the work was evident in every carefully chosen word. During the breakout sessions that followed, Daniel and I were assigned to map the data flow framework. As we worked, I found myself repeatedly impressed by his approach to problem solving, methodical yet creative, with an eye for elegant solutions. "That's an interesting way to handle the authentication sequence," I commented as he sketched a diagram. "I wouldn't have considered decoupling those components." He smiled slightly. "Sometimes the best solutions come from questioning assumptions about what belongs together." Something in his tone suggested he might be talking about more than just code. Over the following weeks, Daniel and I developed a productive professional rhythm. We challenged each other's ideas respectfully, building on our different strengths to create something better than either of us could have designed alone. I found myself looking forward to our working sessions, extending them with questions that could have waited until the next day. One evening, as we were the last two people in the office, Daniel leaned back in his chair and asked, "Want to continue this discussion over dinner? There's a great Vietnamese place around the corner." The invitation was casual, clearly professional, yet I hesitated. This boundary between work colleague and potential friend was one I rarely crossed. Noticing my hesitation, he added, "No pressure. I just thought food might help us solve this permissions hierarchy issue." I surprised myself by agreeing. That dinner became the first of many. Our conversations expanded beyond work to books, hiking trails, the challenges of urban gardening, his passion, and rock climbing, mine. Daniel spoke of his family, Chinese immigrants who had settled in Vancouver, his father's small accounting practice, his mother's community college teaching career, his younger sister's medical studies. His stories were filled with warmth and respect. So different from the dynamics I'd grown up with. I shared carefully edited versions of my own background, mentioning MIT but not my incomplete final semester, describing Boston but not my family. Daniel never pushed for details I wasn't offering, yet his attentive listening created a space where I gradually wanted to share more. 3 months into the project, Daniel suggested a Saturday hike to celebrate completing a particularly challenging module. The trail he chose offered spectacular views of Mount Rainier, and as we reached the summit viewpoint, something shifted in our interaction. Away from keyboards and conference rooms, surrounded by towering trees and mountain vistas, we were simply two people enjoying each other's company. During our descent, Daniel mentioned a documentary film festival happening the following weekend. Would you be interested in going? Not as colleagues, he clarified, but as a date. The word date triggered an immediate internal panic. I'd successfully avoided anything beyond casual coffee meetups since moving to Seattle. The prospect of opening myself to potential hurt again was terrifying. I need to think about it, I replied honestly. Daniel nodded. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. That evening, I called Lauren for the first time in weeks. He asked you out, and you said you'd think about it? She exclaimed. Clara, this is progress. 6 months ago, you would have invented an imaginary pet emergency to avoid answering. But what if it goes wrong? I asked. What if he's not who he seems to be? What if he is exactly who he seems to be? She countered. Look, I get it. Ethan and your family did a number on you, but from everything you've told me, Daniel seems genuinely decent, and you clearly like him enough to be scared of liking him. She was right. After wrestling with my fears for another day, I texted Daniel to accept his invitation. Our first official date revealed another layer of Daniel that deepened my attraction. His intelligence I already knew, but outside of work, his playful sense of humor emerged. He asked thoughtful questions and remembered small details from our previous conversations. Most importantly, he seemed completely comfortable with himself, lacking the insecurity that often drives people to impress others. As weeks became months, our relationship deepened. Daniel's patience allowed me to set the pace, never rushing intimacy or declarations of feeling. When I finally told him I was falling in love with him 8 months after our first date, his response was both joyful and reassuring. I've been in love with you since our third project meeting, he admitted. When you demolished my security protocol design and then immediately built it back up better than before, I knew then you were someone special. Still, I kept my deepest wounds hidden. Daniel knew I was estranged from my family, but not why. That changed after a year together, when he invited me to Vancouver to meet his parents during Lunar New Year celebrations. The Hayes family welcomed me with genuine warmth. Watching their interactions, the teasing affection, the arguments that resolved with laughter, the unquestioned support, brought both joy and an ache of comparison I couldn't suppress. After we returned to Seattle, Daniel found me crying in our hotel room. What's wrong? He asked, immediately concerned. Did my family overwhelm you? My mother can be intense, I know. No. Your family is wonderful, I managed through tears. It's just, they made me see what I never had. That night, I finally shared the full story. MIT, Ethan, my mother's manipulation, my sister's betrayal, my father's complicity, the shattered life I'd fled, and the new one I'd built from the pieces. Daniel listened without interruption, his expression shifting from shock to anger to deep compassion. When I finished, he took my hands in his. Thank you for trusting me with this. I understand now why trust is so difficult for you. He paused, choosing his words carefully. What they did was unforgivable. But I need you to know something. Not everyone will betray you. I won't betray you. You can't promise that, I whispered. I can promise to try every day to be worthy of your trust, he replied. And I can promise that if we ever have conflicts or doubts, I'll bring them directly to you, not to anyone else. His response wasn't a blanket reassurance that my fears were unfounded. Instead, it acknowledged the reality of my experience while offering a different path forward. That honesty meant more than 1,000 promises never to hurt me could have. Our relationship deepened after that night. With my history no longer a shadow between us, I could fully embrace the possibility of a future together. Daniel became not just my partner, but my closest friend, challenging me when I needed challenging, and supporting me when I needed support. 2 years into our relationship, during a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands, Daniel proposed. The ring was an emerald rather than a diamond, set in a design he'd helped create. It reminded me of your eyes, he explained. And emerald symbolizes truth and love. Both seem appropriate. Though I'd known this moment might come, I found myself hesitating. Are you sure? My family baggage is considerable. Daniel smiled. I'm not marrying your family. I'm asking to marry you, Clara West, with all your brilliance and strength and carefully protected heart. Will you build a life with me? Yes, I said, the word carrying all the certainty I'd never thought I'd feel again. Yes, I will. We planned a small wedding with just our closest friends. I didn't invite my family, though I sent my father a brief text letting him know I was getting married. His response was typical. Congratulations. I hope you'll be very happy. No mention of attending. No questions about Daniel. I hadn't expected otherwise. Our wedding day was perfect in its simplicity. Lauren served as my maid of honor, flying in from Boston with her new fiancé. Daniel's sister Sophie was a bridesmaid, and his college roommate Caleb stood as best man. We exchanged vows in a garden overlooking Puget Sound, surrounded by 40 people who truly cared about us. Today I choose you, Daniel said in his vows. And I'll choose you again tomorrow and every day after that. My own vows acknowledge the journey. You taught me that trust isn't naive. It's the bravest choice we can make. I trust you with my heart, my future, and all the dreams we'll build together. After the wedding, life expanded in unexpected ways. Daniel and I combined our technical expertise to launch a healthcare data security startup. The timing was perfect. Increased regulations around patient data privacy created an immediate market for our solutions. Within 18 months, we'd grown from just the two of us working evenings and weekends to a company of 20 employees with significant venture funding. Success brought visibility I hadn't anticipated. Our company was featured in tech publications and local business journals. I gave interviews about data security and presented at conferences. Though I used my married name professionally, Clara Hayes, it was only a matter of time before my past and present collided. That collision came in the form of a LinkedIn message from Ethan. Congratulations on your success. You always were the brilliant one. We'd love to catch up sometime. I showed the message to Daniel, who raised an eyebrow. What do you want to do? Nothing, I replied. He's not part of my life anymore. I deleted the message without responding, but it triggered thoughts about my family that I'd managed to suppress for years. Through occasional texts with my father, I knew that Ethan and Vanessa's marriage was struggling. His career had never recovered from his startup's failure, and Vanessa had grown resentful of their financial dependence on my parents. My mother apparently still controlled the family narrative, positioning me as the ungrateful daughter who had abandoned them. Then came news that changed everything. My father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. His text was characteristically understated. Doctor says 6 to 12 months. Would like to see you before then. After years of maintaining emotional distance, I found myself at a crossroads. The hurt remained, but so did earlier memories of my father, teaching me to ride a bike, sneaking me extra dessert when my mother wasn't looking, quietly encouraging my academic interests even when he didn't understand them. I think I need to go. I told Daniel that evening. Then we'll go, he replied simply. Together. The decision to reconnect with my family opened the door to a confrontation years in the making. A confrontation that would finally bring everything full circle in ways I never could have anticipated. After careful consideration, Daniel and I decided that, rather than visiting my family home where my mother would control the environment, we would invite them to Seattle. The distance would give me emotional space and the home field advantage I needed for such a loaded reunion. We'll host them at our place, Daniel suggested. That way, you can set the terms of engagement. Our place was a waterfront property on Mercer Island, purchased after our company's second round of funding. The modern glass and cedar home, with its expansive views of Lake Washington, reflected our success in a way that words couldn't convey. I wasn't above wanting my family to see what I'd built without them. I called my father directly to extend the invitation. His voice, thinner than I remembered, brightened when I suggested the visit. We could come next month, he said. Your mother and I. And would it be all right if Vanessa and Ethan came too? They're living with us now, and your mother doesn't want to leave Vanessa alone while we're gone. The request sent ice through my veins. Seeing my parents after 6 years would be challenging enough. Facing Ethan and Vanessa seemed impossible, but I recognized the manipulation. My mother was ensuring I couldn't have time alone with my father. Everyone is welcome, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. We have plenty of room. Daniel squeezed my hand in support as I ended the call. Are you sure about this, including Ethan and Vanessa? No, I admitted, but I need to do this completely, no more shadows hanging over us. The month before their visit passed quickly. Between preparing our home and managing our growing company, I had little time to dwell on anxiety. Daniel arranged for a private chef to handle the first night's dinner, understanding that cooking for the people who had hurt me so deeply would be an unfair burden. The day of their arrival, I stood in our living room, looking out over the water, trying to center myself. Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Remember," he said softly, "you're not that vulnerable girl anymore. You're Clara Hayes, co-founder and CTO of Hayes Secure, with 14 patents and a wait list of clients. More importantly, you're a woman who rebuilt her life from scratch. Nothing they say or do can take that away." The doorbell rang precisely at 4 o'clock. My mother had always valued punctuality. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My father stood closest, dramatically thinner than I remembered, his skin bearing the yellowish tint characteristic of his disease. Despite his obvious illness, his eyes lit up at the sight of me. "Clara," he said, his voice catching. Without thinking, I stepped forward to embrace him, his body feeling fragile beneath my arms. My mother stood just behind him, barely aged from my memory. Her critical eyes took me in, then shifted to assess our home visible through the open door. "You look well," she said, her tone suggesting surprise at this fact. "Thank you for having us." Vanessa and Ethan hung back awkwardly. My sister had gained weight, her once model-esque figure now softer, her carefully maintained blonde hair showing dark roots. Beside her, Ethan looked almost exactly as I remembered, though a new tension lined his face and his once confident posture had diminished. "Please come in," I said, stepping back to allow them entry. "Daniel is looking forward to meeting you all." As they entered our home, I watched their expressions. My mother's practiced neutrality couldn't fully mask her shock at the obvious luxury. Vanessa's eyes widened, darting from the vaulted ceilings to the designer furniture to the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the lake view. Ethan seemed to physically shrink as he took in the success I'd achieved without him. Daniel appeared from his office, the consummate host. Tall, distinguished in casual linen pants and a light blue button-down that complemented his warm complexion, he radiated confidence without arrogance. "Welcome to Seattle," he greeted them, shaking hands with my father, then my mother. When he reached Ethan, there was a brief, charged moment as the two men assessed each other. Daniel's smile never wavered, but I saw Ethan recognize something in my husband's eyes, knowledge of exactly who Ethan was and what he had done. "We've prepared the guest rooms upstairs," Daniel continued smoothly. "Why don't you all get settled before dinner? Clara can show you the way." As I led my family upstairs, my mother fell into step beside me. "This is quite a home," she remarked. "Your husband must be very successful." "We both are, Mother," I replied evenly. "I co-founded our company with Daniel. We're equal partners in every sense." She absorbed this information with a tight smile. "How progressive." I showed them to their rooms, my parents in the main guest suite, Vanessa and Ethan in the smaller room across the hall. As they unpacked, I retreated downstairs to find Daniel opening wine in the kitchen. "They're exactly as you described," he said quietly. "Your mother started assessing the property value within 30 seconds of arrival." I laughed despite my tension. "Just wait until dinner. She'll be counting the silver." The private chef Daniel had arranged prepared an exquisite meal. As we gathered around our dining table, the conversation remained superficial. Seattle weather, their flight, my father's treatment options. Daniel expertly filled awkward silences with questions about Boston and observations about the differences between Canadian and American healthcare systems. It was during dessert that my mother finally broached the subject of our company. "So," she said, setting down her fork with precision, "Clara mentioned you run a business together. What exactly do you do?" Daniel glanced at me, silently offering the chance to answer. I took it. "We founded Hayes Secure 4 years ago," I explained. "We specialize in healthcare data security systems. Our software protects patient information while allowing authorized access across different healthcare providers." "Hayes Secure," my mother repeated. "You took Daniel's name for the company." "It tested better with focus groups," I replied smoothly, though the real reason was simpler. I'd wanted nothing of my past associated with my future. "They're being modest," my father interjected. "I looked up their company before we came. They were featured in Forbes last year. Healthcare Security Revolution, the article called it." My mother's eyebrows rose fractionally. "How impressive." Ethan cleared his throat. "What's your market valuation now?" "Last funding round," Daniel answered casually. "Our last valuation was just over $300 million. We're not looking for additional investment currently. We're cash flow positive and growing sustainably." The figure hung in the air, $300 million. Ethan's failed startup had peaked at a $4 million valuation before collapsing. 300 million, Vanessa repeated, looking at Ethan with an expression I couldn't quite read. That's... wow. Enough about business, my mother interjected briskly. Clara, will you and Daniel be starting a family soon? You're not getting any younger, Mom, Vanessa protested weakly. It's a reasonable question, my mother defended. They have this enormous house. Seems a shame not to fill it with children. We're focused on our company right now, Daniel answered diplomatically. But we haven't ruled out children in the future. My mother turned to me. You always said you wanted children, Clara. Remember those dolls you used to line up in your room? You had names for all of them. I had no such memory. Vanessa had been the one obsessed with dolls. This subtle rewriting of history was so typical of my mother that I almost laughed. If Clara and I decide to have children, Daniel said, his voice gentle but firm, it will be on our timeline, not anyone else's. My mother's smile tightened, unused to being challenged so politely yet definitively. As the evening progressed, the dynamics became increasingly clear. My mother attempted to reassert control through passive-aggressive comments and selective memories. My father observed quietly, occasionally catching my eye with what seemed like apology. Vanessa fluctuated between feigned interest in our lives and thinly veiled envy. And Ethan grew progressively more uncomfortable, drinking too much wine and barely contributing to the conversation. By the time we moved to the living room for after-dinner drinks, the facade of a pleasant family reunion had worn dangerously thin. How are things in Boston? I asked, deliberately vague. A weighted silence followed. My father stared into his whiskey. My mother smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. We're between opportunities at the moment, Vanessa finally answered. Ethan's exploring several promising positions. I see, I replied. And you're living with Mom and Dad while you explore? Temporarily, Ethan said quickly. My non-compete clause from Growth Tech just expired, so I can finally look at other startups in the same space. It's been 3 years, Vanessa added, an edge to her voice. A very long temporary arrangement. We're happy to help family through difficult transitions, my mother said pointedly. That's what families do. They support each other through challenges. The implication hung heavily in the air, that I had abandoned my family responsibilities by cutting contact. Daniel, sensing the rising tension, stood. Would anyone like to see the garden? We've just installed a Japanese-inspired meditation area overlooking the water. My father rose eagerly. I'd enjoy that. As the others followed Daniel outside, I remained behind to refresh drinks. Ethan lingered awkwardly, handling his empty glass. Your husband seems like a good man, he said finally. He is, I replied simply. You've done incredibly well for yourself, Clara. I always knew you would. I looked at him directly for the first time that evening. Did you? Because I recall you agreeing that I was too focused on my career to be a good partner, that I'd never understand the social aspects of business. He flushed. I was confused. Your mother can be very persuasive. Yes, she can be. But we all make our own choices, Ethan. He set down his glass. I made the wrong one. Surely you know that by now. Before I could respond, my father appeared in the doorway. Clara, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Ethan nodded awkwardly and slipped past my father toward the garden. My father took a seat on the couch, his movements slow and deliberate. Your home is beautiful, he said. But more importantly, you seem happy. I am, I confirmed. I owe you an apology, he continued, his voice slow. Many apologies, actually. I failed you, Clara. I knew what your mother and Vanessa were doing with Ethan, and I did nothing to stop it. The directness of his admission startled me. Why not? He sighed heavily. Cowardice, mainly. I've spent 40 years taking the path of least resistance with your mother. It was easier to let her have her way than to fight battles I didn't think I could win. He looked up, his eyes damp. But that's no excuse for letting her hurt you, for hurting you myself through inaction. His sincere regret pierced the armor I'd built around my heart. I needed you to stand up for me, Dad. I know, and I'll regret until my dying day that I didn't. He reached for my hand. I don't expect forgiveness, Clara. I just wanted you to know that I see clearly now what happened, and I'm deeply sorry for my part in it. From the garden, raised voices drew our attention. Through the windows, I could see my mother and Vanessa in what appeared to be a heated discussion, with Daniel standing calmly between them. We should join them, my father suggested. Your mother becomes unpredictable when challenged. In the garden, the scene became clear as we approached. My mother was berating Daniel about something while Vanessa stood nearby, arms crossed defensively. Absolutely inappropriate to suggest such a thing, my mother was saying. Our financial arrangements are private family matters. Daniel noticed our approach and turned. Ah, Clara, Richard. We were just discussing family dynamics. He's suggesting we're taking advantage of Dad's finances, Vanessa blurted, as if we're some kind of parasites. Daniel shook his head. That's not what I said. I simply observed that multi-generational living can create complex financial interdependencies that sometimes prevent people from making fully independent choices. My mother's face flushed with anger. You know nothing about our family. On the contrary, Daniel replied calmly. I know a great deal about your family. From Clara's perspective. I know about the manipulation, the favoritism, the betrayal. Daniel, I warned softly, though part of me thrilled to hear someone finally confront my mother directly. Betrayal is a strong word, my mother sniffed. Family matters are complicated. Clara has always had a flair for drama and a selective memory. Mom, Vanessa interrupted, surprising everyone. Stop. Just stop. My mother turned to her in shock. Excuse me? He's right, Vanessa continued, her voice shaking. We both know what you did with Ethan. What we did. It was wrong. Ethan, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Your mother told me Clara was seeing someone else at MIT, that she was using me as a backup plan while pursuing a professor she was interested in. I gasped. That's completely untrue. I know that now, he said quietly. But at the time, it made sense of why you were so busy, why you seemed distant. Your mother showed me texts from your phone that seemed to confirm it. I never texted anything like that, I said, my mind racing. She must have used my phone, Vanessa finished. She had me text things from your old number that she'd kept in her contacts, made it look like they were coming from you. My mother's face hardened. This is absurd. I was simply helping two people who are clearly better suited find their way to each other. By lying? My father asked, his voice stronger than I'd heard it all weekend. By manipulating a young man's feelings and betraying our daughter. I did what was necessary, my mother insisted. Vanessa needed stability that Clara didn't. Clara was always going to be fine on her own. So, you decided to sacrifice my happiness for Vanessa's? I asked, the hurt still fresh despite the years. I made a practical decision, my mother replied unapologetically. Vanessa's looks were her only real asset. She needed to capitalize on them before they faded. You had your education, your career potential. Mom, Vanessa exclaimed, clearly wounded. Is that really how you see me, as nothing but a pretty face with an expiration date? My mother waved dismissively. Don't be so sensitive, I'm simply being practical. I did what any mother would do, ensured both my daughters' futures as best I could. No, my father countered, surprising us all with his firmness. You did what served your vision of how things should be. You didn't consider what either of your daughters actually wanted or needed. The garden fell silent. My mother's face registered shock at my father's rebellion. Vanessa looked torn between vindication and devastation at our mother's assessment of her worth. Ethan stared at the ground, the full extent of his manipulation finally clear. Daniel moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine in silent support. I think, I said finally, that we've all had enough truth for one evening. Let's continue this conversation tomorrow after everyone's had some rest. As we headed inside, Ethan caught my arm gently. Clara, I need you to know how sorry I am. I should have trusted what we had. I should have talked to you directly. I looked at the man I had once loved so deeply, now a diminished figure, trapped in a marriage built on lies. Yes, you should have. Later that night, as Daniel and I prepared for bed, he asked, Are you okay? That was intense. I considered the question carefully. I think I am. For years I've carried this wound, never fully understanding how deep the deception went. Now I know, and strangely, that helps. Your sister surprised me, he observed. I didn't expect her to break ranks with your mother. Me neither, I admitted. Maybe there's hope for her yet. Daniel pulled me close. What happens now with your family? I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I don't know exactly, but for the first time, I think there might be a path forward. At least with my father, and maybe eventually with Vanessa. My mother. That's more complicated. Whatever you decide, Daniel said, kissing my forehead. I'm with you every step of the way. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized that the confrontation had shifted something fundamental within me. The people who had once held such power over my happiness now seemed smaller, less significant. They hadn't determined my fate after all. I had. The morning after our confrontation brought a strange calm to the house. My father joined me for early coffee on the deck, watching the sunrise paint the lake in gold and pink. We sat in comfortable silence for a while before he spoke. I had a long talk with your mother last night, he said, his thin hands cradling his mug. One of many we should have had years ago. I told her things need to change if she wants any relationship with you going forward. And how did that go? I asked, already knowing the answer. He smiled ruefully. About as well as you'd expect. She's not used to ultimatums, especially from me. What about you, Dad? What do you want? He looked out over the water, considering. I want whatever time I have left, to be honest. No more pretending. No more enabling behavior that hurts the people I love. He turned to me. And I want to know my daughter again, if she's willing. Over the next 3 days, our family dynamics shifted in ways I never anticipated. My father and I spent hours talking, filling in the gaps of our lost years. I showed him our company offices, introduced him to colleagues, shared the work that filled me with purpose. He listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions that reminded me of the thoughtful man who had encouraged my early curiosity about computers. I'm proud of you, Clara, he told me as we walked along the waterfront. Not because of your success, though that's remarkable. I'm proud of the woman you've become. Strong, compassionate, resilient. You created this life despite us, not because of us. His cancer made our reconciliation bittersweet, a relationship rebuilt with an expiration date looming. Yet, there was grace in having this time, in clearing away the debris of the past before saying goodbye. With Vanessa, healing came more tentatively. The morning after the confrontation, she asked if I would walk with her around the neighborhood. I don't even know where to start, she said as we strolled past waterfront mansions. Sorry seems inadequate. Why did you do it? I asked. The question had haunted me for years. She was quiet for a long moment. At first, it was just flattering to have someone like Ethan interested in me. Mom kept saying what a good match we'd be, how much more I deserved someone successful than you did. She glanced at me. I know how awful that sounds now. And later, when you knew how much it hurt me. By then I was trapped in Mom's narrative. If what we'd done wasn't justified, then I was just terrible. It was easier to believe you'd be fine, that you didn't need Ethan like I did. She stopped walking. The truth is, I was weak. I let Mom make my decisions because taking responsibility for my own life was scary. Her honesty surprised me. When did that change? Watching you yesterday, successful, confident, genuinely happy with Daniel. It made me see what taking control of your own life actually looks like. She sighed. I'm 35, living in our parents' guest house, in a failing marriage, with no career or purpose. Mom still buys my clothes and tells me how to wear my hair. I felt an unexpected pang of empathy. While my mother had betrayed me, she had infantilized Vanessa, keeping her dependent and diminished. It's not too late to change that, I said carefully. How? The desperation in her voice was palpable. I considered my response. Start with something small but meaningful. Get a job. Any job that's yours alone. Open a bank account in only your name. Build from there. Over the following days, we had several similar conversations. I didn't offer forgiveness. That would take time. But I did offer perspective and practical advice. To my surprise, Vanessa listened. My relationship with my mother remained the most complicated. After the confrontation, she retreated into cool politeness, maintaining the fiction that she had acted in everyone's best interests. On their final evening with us, however, as Daniel and my father discussed baseball in the living room, and Vanessa helped our housekeeper with dishes, my mother found me alone on the deck. You've done well for yourself, she said, an admission that clearly cost her. Better than I expected. Thank you, I replied, not taking the bait of her qualified praise. I still believe I did what was necessary at the time, she continued. But I recognize that my methods were perhaps overly controlling. Coming from my mother, this was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to receive. I won't pretend what you did didn't hurt me deeply, I said. But I've built a good life. A life that makes me happy. She nodded, looking out at the water rather than at me. Your father wants us to seek counseling, family therapy, he calls it. I couldn't hide my surprise. And you agreed? It's important to him. She smoothed her slacks, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. Would you consider joining us occasionally? Not regularly, of course. I know you're busy. The request, halting and uncomfortable, revealed vulnerability I'd never seen in her before. I'll think about it, I promised, not ready to commit, but unwilling to refuse outright. She accepted this with a nod, and we stood in silence watching the sunset. Two women with a broken past and an uncertain future, but perhaps a sliver of possibility between us. The most surprising conversation came from Ethan, who asked to speak with me privately before their departure. Daniel raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the request. Are you comfortable with that? He asked. Yes, I assured him. There's nothing he could say that would affect us. Ethan and I sat in the garden, the space between us filled with history and regret. I wanted to thank you, he began, which was not what I expected. For what? For not hating me, he said simply. You would be justified. I considered this. Hate requires energy. I'd rather direct it elsewhere. Besides, I've come to understand how thoroughly you were manipulated. That doesn't excuse my choices, he said, showing more self-awareness than I remembered. I betrayed your trust. I let myself be convinced that what we had wasn't real or valuable. He hesitated. Seeing you with Daniel, the way he looks at you, the respect between you, it's made me realize what I gave up. I tensed, worried this was heading toward an inappropriate confession. He noticed and quickly added, I'm not saying this to disrupt your life or suggest anything inappropriate. I want you to know that I recognize what I lost, the person I hurt. My biggest regret isn't the failed startup or the career setbacks. It's that I let someone else define what should have mattered most to me. His sincerity seemed genuine, his regret palpable. What will you do now? I asked. He sighed. Start over, I think. Vanessa and I have been pretending for years. Neither of us is happy. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish them misery. Don't be. It's time for both of us to face reality and make better choices. He stood to leave, then paused. You deserved better, Clara. I'm glad you found it. After they left, our house felt simultaneously emptier and lighter. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, clearing away festering wounds and replacing them with clear-eyed understanding. I couldn't change the past, but I could choose how it affected my future. In the months that followed, we established new patterns of connection. My father and I spoke weekly by phone and video chat as his condition deteriorated. I flew to Boston twice to spend time with him, difficult visits that nevertheless brought peace to both of us. When he passed away 8 months after our reunion, I stood beside my mother and sister at his funeral, united in grief if not in full reconciliation. After my father's death, Vanessa surprised everyone by following through on her promises to change. She filed for divorce from Ethan, moved into her own apartment, and found work as an administrative assistant at a community college. The position was modest, but represented independence she'd never known. We maintained cautious but increasingly warm contact, rebuilding a relationship that had been poisoned since childhood. My mother remained my mother, critical, controlling, resistant to change. But our confrontation had shifted the power dynamic permanently. She could no longer rewrite history or manipulate me. I engaged with her on my terms, or not at all. It wasn't a warm relationship, but it was an honest one. With my family receding to their appropriate place in my life rather than dominating it, Daniel and I focused on our future. Our company continued to thrive, expanding internationally and developing new security protocols that became industry standards. 2 years after the family confrontation, we welcomed our daughter, Emma, followed 18 months later by our son, Noah. Becoming parents ourselves cast my family history into sharper relief. As I held my children, I made silent promises never to play favorites, to see and celebrate them for exactly who they were, to let them chart their own courses with support rather than control. Watching Daniel with our children, patient, attentive, delighting in their uniqueness, I often reflected on how completely my life had transformed from what it might have been. Had my mother not orchestrated that betrayal, had Ethan and I married as once planned, would I have found this level of fulfillment? The painful truth was that their betrayal, while devastating, had ultimately freed me to build something far better than I might have otherwise. This wasn't about forgiving the unforgivable or finding silver linings in trauma. It was about recognizing that our worst moments don't define us unless we let them. That sometimes the path forward requires leaving behind not just people who hurt us, but also dreams and expectations that no longer serve us. The ultimate victory wasn't financial success or professional recognition, though those were gratifying. It wasn't even the beautiful family Daniel and I created, precious as they were. The victory was internal, the knowledge that I had rebuilt myself from broken pieces into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. On my daughter's 3rd birthday, as our home filled with friends and laughter, I caught sight of myself in a window reflection. The woman looking back bore little resemblance to the devastated girl who had once fled her family's betrayal. This woman stood tall, confident in her worth, surrounded by love she had chosen, and that had chosen her in return. I often think about the question of forgiveness. Have I forgiven my mother, my sister, Ethan? Not entirely. Some betrayals leave permanent marks, but I've released the anger that once threatened to define me. I've learned that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I've found peace in allowing those who hurt me to occupy an appropriate space in my heart and history, acknowledged, but no longer central. The journey from betrayal to this peaceful place wasn't linear or simple. It required confronting painful truths, setting boundaries, and most importantly, believing I deserved better. Perhaps that's the most valuable lesson of all, that our capacity for happiness expands when we truly believe we're worthy of it. So if you're facing betrayal or heartbreak right now, remember this. The people who hurt you don't get to decide your worth. They don't get to write the ending to your story. That power belongs to you alone. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its cruelest blows, redirecting us toward paths we might never have chosen, but that lead to places far better than we imagined. What painful experience has ultimately led you to something better? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and hit that notification bell to catch my next video. Remember, every ending is just the beginning of something new. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care. Good luck. My sister stole my credit card for a first-class trip to Tokyo. My dad defended her and thought I'd stay quiet, but made them both regret it. I awoke to the pale blue glow of my phone's screen lighting up the nightstand. I assumed it was simply another spam notification, but the buzzing didn't stop. Still partly sleeping, I reached over and squinted at the stream of messages from my bank app. 10, 11, and 12 transactions occurred between 3:07 and 3:28 a.m. At first, my brain was unable to process it. For $1,200 on an airplane, $2,800 at a luxury boutique in Tokyo, $3,100 at a high-end jewelry store, and a few of smaller charges, if you consider $600 small, at gift stores and restaurants I'd never heard of. My stomach twisted. I bolted awake, the cold reality washing over me like ice water. I retrieved my wallet from the desk drawer, which was empty. My credit card slot was bare. I lived with family, not strangers. My younger sister, Lena, had been visiting with me for a few weeks, which had somehow turned into 2 months. She was supposedly between jobs and just wanted a place to crash. I'd been paying for her groceries, utilities, and even Uber rides because public transportation freaked her out. And now my card was gone. I stumbled along the corridor, my heart thumping so hard that it felt like it was rattling my ribs. Her door was closed, and all she could hear was the low hum of her phone charger. I knocked once, twice, nothing. I pushed the door open just enough to glance inside. There is no Lena, just an empty bed. I examined the kitchen in the dark. The bathroom is vacant. The front door is slightly ajar. By the time the sun rose, I had my answer. Lena's Instagram story, timestamped at 4:02 a.m., showed her smiling at the airport with our cousin Maya, both holding boarding cards. The message said, "First class to Tokyo, baby. When life's too short, make it luxurious." My jaw tightened so fiercely it hurt. By lunchtime, my bank confirmed that the charges were slightly more than $11,000. I froze the card and filed the fraud report, but all the while, a deeper rage was seething, not just at Lena, but also at the fact that I knew exactly how this would turn out when she returned, and I was not wrong. A week later, she strolled through my front door, as if she had just returned from a weekend excursion, pulling 2 big luxury suitcases behind her. Maya was not with her. She appeared to be having a good time in Kyoto. Lena smelled like expensive perfume and duty-free champagne. Before I could answer, Dad, who had arrived to bring her up, moved forward and gave me that disappointed father look. "Stop pretending," he urged bluntly. "She would never touch your money. You've always been paranoid about her." I didn't fight. I simply smiled because of the card she used. To truly comprehend why my sister swiped my credit card in the middle of the night was not an isolated incident, you must first grasp the context. Lena has been the family's untouchable princess from the day she was born. I'm not exaggerating. If she wanted something, she got it, no matter how irresponsible or selfish. And if anyone ever called her out, she'd transform into a sensitive soul incapable of dealing with negativity. Meanwhile, I was the designated responsible one, the one who earned high grades without being asked, who obtained a job at 16 to pay for my own phone bill, and who avoided trouble because I knew it would fall entirely on my shoulders. Dad used to call me dependable, which sounds good until you realize it was really code for, we can take from you without worrying you'll complain. By the time I was 23, I had a solid career in IT and my own 2-bedroom apartment. Lena was 21 and on her third professional path. She'd completed 6 months of community college before taking a break to figure herself out, then tried cosmetology school before concluding beauty was too shallow, and finally resigned a cafe job because management didn't like her enthusiasm. Guess who paid her rent when she was between incomes? Guess who put groceries in her fridge when she mentioned her paycheck was delayed? Guess who co-signed for her last credit card since the bank was unfair to her credit history? Yeah, me. And here's the kicker. None of it ever qualified as generosity in her view. It was simply what family did, which, strangely enough, only appeared to apply when she required assistance. 2 months prior to the Tokyo stunt, Lena called me at midnight, crying. She had a quarrel with her roommate and needed a place to rest for a few nights. I said, fine. I had a spare room. Despite every red flag I'd learned to ignore, I persuaded myself it was just temporary. Night 1 went into night 5, then 2 weeks, and she began referring to my apartment as our home. When I saw her enter my fridge and drink the last of my oat milk without asking, I realized I'd made a mistake. But the true caution indicator came when I noticed pricey items arriving under her name. High-end beauty brands, expensive sneakers, things I knew she couldn't afford. When I inquired how she was going to pay for it, she chuckled. Oh, don't worry, I've got it handled. Translation: she was racking up debt on a new card or running a bill that she would later expect someone else, most likely me, to fix. Fast forward to the night before she stole my credit card. We hadn't spoken much all day because I had been working late on an assignment. Around midnight, I eventually turned down my laptop and went to bed. She was still up, splayed out on the couch, going through Instagram with Maya over FaceTime. Maya, our cousin, is Lena's companion in crime. She's the same type who seeks comfort, expects assistance, and avoids personal accountability. When you combine these factors, you have a perfect storm of terrible judgments. I overheard just enough of their conversation to know they were discussing getting away and living it up, but I assumed it was just their normal dream talk. Lena had less than $100, and she couldn't even pay her phone bill last month without borrowing from me. At 3 a.m., as I was sleeping in my bed, she strolled in, removed my wallet from my desk, and swiped my credit card as if it were a pin she needed. Security footage from the apartment hallway later captured her tiptoeing out with her suitcase, meeting Maya downstairs and walking straight for the rideshare that would take them to the airport. When Dad advised me to quit pretending she'd ever touch my money, it wasn't simply ignorance. It was the same pattern I'd been experiencing for years. When Lena smashed her father's car while texting and driving at the age of 19, he told her she was lucky to be alive and purchased her a newer one because the previous one had horrible memories. When she squandered $4,000 of her funds on a week in Miami, he replied, "You can't put a price on life experiences." When she was fired from her retail job for missing 3 shifts, he took her out to lunch to console her. What about me? When I overdrew my account by $40 in college due to a late paycheck, Dad gave me a 20-minute lecture on financial responsibility and adulthood. So, as I stood there, Dad glaring at me and Lena smirking just behind him, I realized there was no use in arguing or explaining that I had the bank records, timestamps, and Instagram postings. He would not hear it. To him, Lena was not just innocent, she was incapable of being guilty. And I was the worried elder sibling who had to learn to let go. But here's what no one in my family knew. That credit card she grabbed wasn't just any card. It was a business card linked directly to my IT consulting side business, which I'd been discreetly cultivating for 2 years. And it had security features that Lena couldn't fathom. The moment she tapped it for the first-class tickets, I received an alert. Not just from the bank, but from my own tracking system. And every subsequent transaction was logged, geotagged, and backed up with merchant data that made her head spin. In other words, I already had everything I needed, and I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to make sure she, or anyone in my family, never did anything like this again. A week after Lena returned from Japan, the air in my apartment was radioactive. She did not apologize. She did not explain. She pretended to be on a simple weekend excursion, rather than a two-country first-class trip paid for with unapproved charges. Dad still couldn't let it go. He stopped over every other day to check on her, which actually meant glaring at me like I was the bad guy for being cold to my poor sister. That Friday, I determined I was finished. I'm tired of being the family member that can always be counted on to assist out financially. I'm done biting my tongue while Lena and Maya lived on other people's money. I'm done with Dad's blind devotion to his tiny child. So I set the stage. I informed Lena that I had ordered takeout for all of us, her favorite sushi, the costly sort that makes you wonder if it's even allowed to charge that much for raw fish. I told her that we needed to clear the air, therefore her father should join us. They both arrived on time, Lena in her silk robe and $900 expensive slippers, the same ones she'd purchased in Ginza, Tokyo, and Dad in his normal jeans and polo, that disapproving look already loaded. We sat around my dining table with takeout containers steaming in the center. I waited a few minutes before leaning back in my chair and asking, "So, what about the $11,000 you spent on my business card?" Lena rolled her eyes so hard that I feared they would fall out. "Oh my God, you're still on that. I told you I didn't touch your money. Stop making up stories." Dad jumped in instantly. "Enough, Ethan. We're not going to entertain this nonsense again." I smiled. "Good. We're not going to entertain it, we're going to prove it." I reached beneath the table and pulled out my laptop. I'd already scheduled a report from my card's tracking system for each purchase she made, complete with merchant names, timestamps and CCTV stills from vendors who were more than willing to send them over once I stated it was part of an inquiry into fraudulent purchases. The first image on the screen showed Lena and Maya in the LAX first-class lounge, champagne flutes in hand and boarding passes clearly visible. Time, 3:58 a.m. Dad froze in mid-bite. Lena's chopsticks clattered on the table. The next slide shows Lena using my card at Haneda Airport's duty-free store, arms full of expensive bags. Time, 5:12 p.m., Japan time. Click another. Her purchasing the same $900 slippers she was presently wearing. "You want me to keep going?" I inquired, my voice calm but loud enough to startle Lena. Dad started talking, but I stopped him off. "No, you've been telling me to stop pretending all week, so let's get it all out in the open. I didn't just freeze the card. I filed a formal claim for unauthorized charges, which means the bank has already reversed the charges, and the police have a copy of this report." Lena's face was robbed of color. You called the cops?" "You made purchases without my permission," I stated plainly. "On a business account, which, by the way, carries serious legal consequences. You made purchases without permission and jeopardized my livelihood." Dad slapped his hand upon the table. "Ethan, this is family. We don't bring in the police over family disputes." I laughed sharply, bitterly. "Family? You mean the same family that has spent years placing a constant financial and emotional burden on me while defending her every screw-up? The same family that told me to stop pretending instead of believing me when I had evidence in my hand?" Lena's voice cracked, and her faux confidence slipped. "I can pay you back." I leaned forwards. "No, you can't because you don't have $11,000 and you won't, which is why you're going to pack your bags tonight and get out of my apartment. And you, Dad," I said as I glanced at him, "are not welcome here until you can admit what she did and apologize for siding against me." Dad's jaws tightened. "You're making a mistake. She's your sister." "No," I replied, getting up and raising my voice for the first time. "She's a grown adult who has been allowed to rely on others instead of managing her own responsibilities because you've never made her face consequences. Well, congratulations, she's about to." I passed an envelope across the table, including a printed copy of the police report, the official case number from the bank's inquiry, and a record of all transactions she had made. "If you think I'm bluffing, feel free to call the detective whose number is at the bottom. He's expecting your call." Lena's hands shook as she pushed away from the table. "You're ruining my life." I stepped aside and pointed to the door. "No, Lena. I'm simply making sure you don't interfere in my life again." She stormed into the spare room and started packing. Dad remained there for a moment, staring at the envelope as if it would burst. Then he rose up, said something about my being callous, and went after her. As the door closed behind them, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete, unwavering authority over my own life. And I knew it was only the beginning. My phone continued to vibrate for the first 24 hours after I kicked Lena and Dad out. Lena began with texts. "You're overreacting. You've always been jealous of me. You'll regret this." When that didn't work, she moved on to voice messages, partly crying, half screaming. "You've turned the whole family against me. Dad's so upset. He hasn't eaten all day." Good. Allow him to experience what it is like when someone else isn't providing for him. The next morning, Dad himself called. I ignored him. Then came the guilt trips from my mother, whom I hadn't seen in weeks. "Can't you just drop the charges? It's tearing us apart. She's your only sister. You two should be supporting each other." "Are you supporting her? I have been doing this since we were teenagers." Lena had only ever supported her own poor behaviors. 2 days later, the actual repercussions were apparent. Detective Harris from the department that handles financial cases called to confirm that they had formally contacted Lena. She had 2 options: repay the entire sum and sign an admission of guilt, or face charges. When I heard that, I expected another tidal wave of begging from her. Instead, I received quiet, which was nearly worse. It meant she was scurrying. Sure enough, Maya called me the next morning. Maya never phoned me unless she needed something. "Ethan," she began, attempting to maintain a cheerful demeanor. "Lena is terrified. If she goes down for this, she will never be able to work again." I waited a full minute for her to finish speaking before interrupting. Maybe she should have thought of that before carrying out that activity without permission. "Oh, and Maya, if I were you, I'd delete that Tokyo photo dump before the police start asking how you paid for your ticket." The call went dead. That afternoon, Mom arrived at my door unexpectedly. She didn't knock, she simply strolled in as if she still had that right. Her opening words were not "hello," or "can we talk?" "They're staying at a motel," she explained. "It's awful. You've humiliated your sister." I just leaned against the counter and watched her as if I had never seen her before. Humiliated? "No, Mom. I corrected the situation. That's all." "You could have handled it quietly," she remarked, her voice shaking with a rehearsed combination of guilt and disappointment. "Family matters shouldn't be public." "They're only public," I replied, "because Lena made $11,000 worth of documented purchases made without authorization. She wanted first-class treatment. Now she's getting it." Mom's face stiffened. "Your father thinks you've gone too far." I smiled. "Your father isn't welcome here until he admits he was wrong. And if he keeps calling the detective to clear this up, he's going to find himself explaining why he was defending actions under legal investigation." That prevented her from continuing. Within a week, the family had separated into 2 camps. On one side were Dad, Mom, and the 2 cousins who had always been devoted to Lena's side. They painted me as the callous, resentful elder sibling who betrayed his own sister. On the opposite side, my aunt, uncle, and a few others who had been quietly observing this interaction for years. They contacted me personally to say they were proud of me for finally sticking up for myself. Uncle David said, "We all knew Lena was out of control, but no one wanted to be the first to say it." The real kicker arrived 2 weeks later. Lena arrived at my building, not to apologize, but to negotiate. She was wearing pants and a hoodie, with no designer labels visible, and she appeared little. "They're offering to drop everything if I pay you back in 6 months, she explained, avoiding eye contact. "But I need you to tell them you're okay with it." I did not even hesitate. "You can send the payments through my lawyer. I'm not speaking for you, and I'm not softening anything. You do this on the record, or you deal with the charges." Her jaw stiffened, and her eyes became blurry. "You're really done with me, aren't you?" I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Lena, I was done with you the second you took my card. This is just paperwork." She went without saying anything else. 3 months later, the matter was closed. She had pulled together the money by any means necessary, signed the acknowledgement, and the deception was now legally on her record. Dad hasn't looked into my eyes since, and my life became quieter, calmer, and richer, not only financially, but also in ways I had not realized I needed. No more surprise knocks. No more loans that are never paid back. No more avoiding someone else's entitlement in my own home. For the first time in years, I am solely responsible for my finances, space, and peace of mind. It has been 6 months since the night I slid the police report across the table. Lena hasn't visited my residence since. Dad still texts the occasional passive-aggressive message. "Hope you're proud of yourself." But the fact is, I am. For the first time in my life, I am not in damage control. I'm not waiting for the next emergency that only I can resolve. I am not budgeting for someone else's recklessness. Most significantly, I no longer feel bad about putting myself first. Looking back, it's almost hilarious how long I allowed that pattern continue. Years of persuading myself it was only once. Paying the money was easier than starting a quarrel. That family helps family, even if it puts a perpetual financial strain on you. But here's something they don't want you to know. If you don't set boundaries, they'll keep changing the goalposts until you're unrecognizable to yourself. They will not quit because you have been generous. They quit because you made it hard for them to continue taking. And the instant you draw that boundary, they'll accuse you of being selfish for cutting off their supply. A few weeks ago I ran into Maya in the grocery store. She froze, like if she had seen a ghost. I smiled, said hello and continued going. She undoubtedly expected me to inquire about Lena, indicating some remaining curiosity. I didn't because I honestly didn't care. Lena's record means she can't get certain jobs anymore, which I'm sure she finds unjust. She still posts on Instagram, but it's no longer about first-class lounges, but rather thrift store finds and inexpensive wine. Her captions are full of starting over quotes, but I already know the reality. This is not a reinvention. Reality is now catching up. I'm not satisfied with her challenges, but I'm also not stressed by them. Actions have consequences, and for once, they arrived where they belonged. A few days ago, I was sitting on my couch, feet up, with my laptop open to my next large client contract. My phone flashed with an email from the bank verifying that a $7,800 payment had been received, the final installment from Lena. I stared at that number for a bit before laughing. Not because I needed the money. I'm doing better than ever, but because it seemed like the final nail in a coffin I'd been working on for years. Not for Lena, for the previous version of myself. The version that went above and above to maintain order. That confused enabling and affection. That believed that saying no meant betraying family. That I believed my worth was determined by how much I could give before breaking. That person is no longer alive. Is this the new me? I keep my doors locked, bank alerts turned on, and my limits in place. I live in a space that is completely mine, financially, emotionally, and physically. I've stopped explaining my choices to folks who are simply upset because they can no longer profit from my services. And if Dad, Lena, or anybody else from that side of the family ever attempts to push those boundaries again, I won't need proof or a police report to shut them down. It will only take one word: no. Because I have learnt the most liberating truth there is. I'm not their safety net. I'm not their backup plan. I'm not their last resort. I'll never be their ATM.